Long ago, there lived a warrior hailed as the strongest man to ever walk the earth. Revered as a god of the blade, he challenged every rival to prove his worth. Yet he constantly questioned if he had truly reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship. As his monstrous opponent falls, it confirms his victory is no illusion. He has undeniably reached the summit of his craft. The dying creature finds peace in being slain by such a master, and as a final gesture, it asks the man if he harbors any lingering desires. Having been moved by the hero's strength, the beast offers to fulfill a wish. The hero declines, knowing his own life is fading, content that his dream of reaching the top has already come true. Magic has long been a myth in his world, but he admits that if he were ever reincarnated, it might be an interesting path to pursue. Sensing this hidden wish, the creature takes action. Suddenly, a young boy opens his eyes and stares at his small, unfamiliar hands. The lingering sense of displacement finally makes sense. He realizes he has been reincarnated into a brand new life. Taking a deep breath, he decides that his past achievements no longer matter in this new world. Today is his 6th birthday, the pivotal day he will finally awaken his skills and hidden abilities. In this realm, skills define a person's destiny, revealing their natural talents and future potential. It is a system of growth that his previous world completely lacked. His sister, Lena, approaches him with a bright smile to greet her brother. She wishes him a happy birthday and tells him to give it his all, though Soma remains calm, insisting there's no need for him to worry. Lena tells him not to be nervous, but Soma is more curious than anxious. She expects great things from him, predicting he'll awaken at least 3 or 4 powerful skills. Above all, he yearns to master magic, a power he could only dream of in his former life. Once his skills are appraised, his study of the arcane can finally begin. Lena is just as excited to see what magic he'll wield, and Soma heads toward the appraisal, eager to see what his future holds. However, the results leave him paralyzed with shock. He desperately asks his mother to repeat what she just said. The news is devastating. He has no aptitude for martial arts, magic, or any special skills. In this world of talent, he is considered completely worthless. His mother remembers his deep desire to learn magic and reassures him. She promises that regardless of his lack of innate talent, she will personally teach him. As Soma walks through the forest, he reflects on his situation, realizing that being talentless won't stop a man who once reached the top. Soma scoured the area, searching for the perfect tree to begin his training. His teacher hailed him as a prodigy for completing a 3-year curriculum in just 6 months at age 5. But Soma knew the truth. He wasn't a genius. He just remembered everything from his past life. It wasn't natural talent. It was reincarnation. Despite his memories, his lack of mana meant he was labeled talentless, a verdict that usually forced people to give up on magic forever. But Soma refused to accept that. He recalled his teacher's philosophy, that skills are just one manifestation of talent, and lacking a specific skill doesn't mean one is truly powerless. Anyone can swing a blade, regardless of their status. There were even legendary reports of the talentless defeating those blessed with the most powerful skills. Even if he was the exception to the rule, Soma was determined to push himself to the absolute limit. He prepared to face the challenges of this new world with the same resolve he held during his final stand against the dragon. Armed with nothing but a simple wooden stick, he took a stance against a massive 100-year-old tree. On paper, this boy was a failure, unable to master javelin throwing, archery, hand-to-hand combat, or even the most basic magical arts. All he supposedly had was a useless, incomprehensible sound skill. But as he swung, he channeled the God-Slayer and Dragon-Slayer techniques of his past. With the precision of a master, his steel cutting blade struck true. With a single, impossible strike, he successfully sliced through the massive trunk. This was proof that even he could reach the heights of magic. But as the tree began to fall, the strain became too much. A divine notification echoed. Formerly the strongest in the world, divine level caliber, proof of completion achieved. This soul will no longer grow. Soma barely had time to wonder how he would utilize this power before his consciousness faded, and he collapsed to the forest floor. Suddenly, a young girl emerged from the bushes, staring in shock at the unconscious boy. She had come to this desolate forest to lament her own lack of talent, thinking she would be alone under the ominous sky. But her solitude was shattered when a massive tree crashed down right before her eyes. She couldn't wrap her head around what had just happened, but she knew standing around wouldn't provide answers. Driven by curiosity, she moved in to investigate. This forest was rumored to be infested with demons, which is exactly why she thought she wouldn't encounter any humans here. Now, she was questioning everything. She initially feared she was being hunted, but as she drew closer, it became clear that there was no immediate threat. She stared at the oak stump in disbelief. The cut was far too clean to be natural rot. As she looked around, she heard a faint sound, panicked, and accidentally stepped right on the hero's head. As she scanned the area, she realized the figure was just a child. She called out to him, but the boy remained completely motionless. Soma pleaded with her to stop stepping on him, explaining that he was physically unable to move. When she demanded an explanation, he admitted it was a side effect of using skills from his past life. Activating such power without preparation was a reckless gamble. When the girl, Virgo, asked what he was doing in a place like this, he bluntly stated he was just lying there. An answer she found incredibly suspicious. Despite his predicament, he seemed surprisingly spirited. Soma explained that while he could still talk, his body was paralyzed and would need a few days of rest to recover. The girl hesitated. Finding a lone, suspicious child in a place like this was a major red flag, and she knew she should probably just leave him behind. Ultimately, her conscience won out. She decided to help, warning him that he'd better be grateful for her saving his life. Soma offered a grateful smile, but their sudden proximity made her flush with embarrassment. She couldn't help but wonder who this mysterious boy actually was. Stranded in the heart of an eerie forest, she struggled under his weight, complaining that he was much heavier than he looked. Later, as he lay in his own bed, the hero reflected on just how badly he had screwed up. Every muscle in his body screamed in pain. He realized how lucky he was to have been rescued, noting that he still didn't even know the girl's name. If they ever crossed paths again, he vowed to thank her properly. Soon after, Camila entered the room, using her unique assessment ability to check on his condition. Seeing his improvement, she asked if he was still in pain. Soma reassured her that he was fine and was just dealing with lingering fatigue. Camila apologized, feeling bad that she couldn't even bring him a book to read in his weakened state. But Soma told her that her daily visits were more than enough. He noted that his mother had only visited on the first day, seemingly still uneasy around him. To change the subject, he asked Camila if she could give him some assignments. The woman was taken aback, questioning how much he actually knew. Soma admitted he was a complete novice, but was desperate to learn everything there was to know about magic. As Camila considered the request, Soma doubled down, insisting he would do whatever it took to get his hands on any information regarding magic. Charmed by his resolve, she smiled and promised to prepare a special task for him to look forward to. A week later, the hero had finally made a full recovery. He climbed out of bed in the early hours of the morning, restless and eager to get back to work. He decided to jump straight into his daily routine, knowing he needed to whip his weakened body back into peak condition. Camila reflects on her new role as a tutor. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it's proving to be far more troublesome than she anticipated. Everything spiraled out of control during the skills assessment, a routine evaluation that yielded devastating results she never wanted to see. His future is shattered. Once the proud heir to a ducal house, he's now treated as if he shouldn't even exist, plagued by what-ifs regarding his birth, his lineage, and that cursed assessment. Overwhelmed by guilt, Camila stepped up as his personal tutor, replacing a long line of predecessors. However, his education is so neglected that she's been forced to work with decade-old textbooks. She couldn't fathom why previous teachers despised him so much, but dwelling on the past wouldn't help. Shaking her head, she clears her mind to focus on the task at hand. Deciding to take a quick breather, her eyes land on the young hero nearby. He offers a polite greeting, claiming their meeting is mere coincidence, but Camila is skeptical and asks what brings him to this spot. Soma nonchalantly claims he's just going about his day. When Camila reminds him that his mother strictly forbade him from being here, he cheekily replies that while she told him, he never actually agreed to it. Camila notes that the area isn't as perilous as rumors suggest, but then remembers his house arrest. Curious, she asks how he managed to slip past his high-level security. Soma casually explains that he just slipped through the cracks like always, leaving Camila to wonder if the guards are finally going easy on him after the assessment. Regardless, she realizes that being cooped up at home must be stifling, so she suggests they head to the training grounds. She's genuinely curious about his daily routine, even if he considers swinging a sword to be mundane work. She offers to spar, despite her expertise lying with heavy axes rather than swords. Soma accepts the challenge immediately, dropping into a stance that impresses her with its perfect form. She proposes a light warm-up, promising to be gentle since he's still in recovery. However, she's wielding a live axe against his wooden blade, so she graciously grants him the first move. Soma accepts the terms without hesitation, and with a confident nod, she dares him to give her everything he's got. A split second later, Camila finds herself flat on her back, staring at the sky in absolute disbelief. Soma asks if he was a bit too aggressive, noting that while she promised an easy session, that exchange didn't even last long enough to be called a fight. Camila lets out a stunned laugh, rationalizing that she's still recovering and clearly let her guard down. Yet she still can't process how he moved so fast. Soma urges her not to hold back next time. It's understandable why she did. On paper, the gap between an axe master and a skillless boy should be an insurmountable mountain. She challenges him to go all out, realizing that possessing such high-level mastery without a formal skill is the mark of a true genius. However, for a child who doesn't possess a single skill, this level of power feels like some kind of mistake. Camila had originally planned for nothing more than a light warm-up, but the boy was radiating an incredible suffocating tension. In an instant, she understands the reality of the situation. Every cell in her body, her years of experience, and her raw intuition tell her that she needs to give this her all, regardless of his lack of skills. This young swordsman is deadly serious. Camila squares off against our protagonist, her eyes locked onto his. He seemed to be inviting her to take the initiative, so she hoisted her massive axe, and in the next heartbeat she struck with everything she had. She unleashed her advanced axe technique, world martial art, mind's eye, and supernatural phenomenon. Camila's strike is massive, her axe literally carving through the earth itself. However, the hero didn't even flinch, immediately launching a counterattack against his teacher. Pushed to the brink, the girl decides to push her advanced techniques even further. She chains together mind's eye, supernatural phenomenon, and her world martial arts in a blur of steel. She finds herself becoming amused. If he can stop a heavy battle axe with a mere wooden pole, his potential must be limitless. It's an absurd clash between a supposed novice and a seasoned warrior. Usually the difference in skill levels is an absolute, undeniable law of this world. Preparing for a new assault, she screams and swings, cycling through warrior's sorrow and the dance of indignation. Finally, she delivers her devastating signature move, the Titanic strike. After 5 minutes of relentless combat, she's left speechless, forced to strike with lethal intent just to keep up with him. Years ago, a single mistake ruined a young girl's life. Haunted by that failure, she swore off the responsibility of skill assessment forever. Knowing the truth, Sophia stood by her, urging her to finally leave the shadows of the past behind. Back in the present, the teacher and student continue their intense clash of sword and axe. Her mind races, weighted down by the heavy burden of her past and her duty to the boy. If her assessments are truly flawed, she fears he'll grow to despise her for ruining his potential. Seizing a sudden moment of distraction, the young man manages to catch her off guard. But in a flash, she recovers and disarms him, sending his practice weapon flying. Her axe momentum carries forward, and she frantically tries to pull the blow to avoid hurting him. The sudden shift in weight causes her to lose her balance, tumbling directly on top of him. Flustered, he apologizes for his lack of focus, feeling ashamed of the awkward position. She notes his strange final strike, while Suma admits he simply let his mind wander. Camila chides him for overexerting himself before recovering, but he insists he's rested and ready. As his break ends, they bicker over their duties before she finally offers a rare, soft apology. Suma points out she's still pinning him to the ground, but Camila claims she's just teaching him respect. She warns him not to be late for their next session in the forest before making her exit. Suma collapses in exhaustion, lamenting his weakness before calling out to a hidden observer. When the girl asks how he knew she was there, he simply attributes it to his sharpened instincts. It had been exactly 1 week since they met, and he wanted to thank her once more for saving his life. Blushing furiously, the young lady looks away, bashfully claiming that his gratitude is unnecessary. He acted on instinct, believing it was his only option, but then realized he still didn't even know her name. Since he hadn't asked, she hadn't seen a reason to offer it. Suma explained that he'd appreciate it if she told him who she was. After introducing himself, he told her she could call him whatever she felt comfortable with. He reasoned that he needed to know her name just in case he had to call out to her, even suggesting a nickname. With a sigh, she finally revealed her name was Aina. When he casually called her Aina, she became flustered, wondering why he skipped the formal suffixes. He reminded her of her own rules, so she decided to drop the formalities with him as well. His blunt use of her first name left her irritated, mostly because she couldn't stand how composed he remained. Shaking it off, she urged him to finish what he was saying. Suma was baffled by her sudden spark of anger. He told her that if she ever found herself in a bind, he'd be there to help her in any way he possibly could. Confused, Ina asked why he was going so far for her. He explained that since she had helped him the previous week, he intended to fully repay that debt. She insisted he owed her nothing since she helped him of her own free will, but Suma wasn't backing down. He recognized her kindness and was determined to reciprocate. Caught off guard by his sincerity, the girl couldn't help but blush and offer a small smile. Suma watched her closely, admitting he'd been thinking about this since their first encounter. He was right. A smile truly did suit her. He bluntly told her she was cute when she smiled, sending Ina into a blushing frenzy. To him, it wasn't a flirtation. He was just stating that she was objectively beautiful. Overwhelmed by his brutal honesty, she begged him to stop. Back at the Newmont estate, Camila let out a heavy sigh, prompting Suma to ask what was bothering her. She had planned to evaluate his progress in person, but he had already devoured every book in the library. He was far more dedicated than she ever anticipated. Moving on to their lesson, she began with the history of the house and the local geography, specifically focusing on the ominous evil forest. Camila explained that the forest earned its name as the boundary of mage territory, the very place where ancient mages launched their bloody invasions. Suma noted that the woods seemed safe enough now, mentioning that he hadn't seen any signs of mages during his time exploring the area. There wasn't a single trace of danger, leaving him to wonder why such a prestigious house was built in such a desolate, remote location. However, when viewed as a strategic border, it made perfect sense. His family was essentially the shield tasked with guarding the front line. Camila was impressed by how quickly he connected the dots without any prior instruction. To Suma, this world's power dynamics felt remarkably similar to his old one. The girl asks what he knows about mages, and he notes they're called enemies of humanity, though he always thought that was just a bedtime story. She clarifies they're actually just heretical outsiders. For various reasons, these outcasts opposed his country, eventually uniting with other exile groups to form a rival nation. Camila is impressed by his insight, noting that he has a sharp mind for grasping such complex concepts, something his former teacher also admired. That's why she wasn't told the truth beforehand. They wanted her to evaluate his abilities without bias, though that dirty duel forced her to learn the hard way. Camila agrees that mages are exactly as he described, but emphasizes that their high-level skills make them incredibly dangerous. Their combat prowess is so great that even the weakest mage requires an intermediate warrior to stop them. Ordinary soldiers don't stand a chance. When he asks for clarification, she warns him not to underestimate them, as their inherent skill levels are far beyond the norm. Soma notes that while they are likely powerful, it's still a mystery whether they rely on specialized techniques or forbidden black magic. They conclude that the enemy is formidable, especially since that nation treats a mage's skill level as an absolute, undeniable truth. To survive as a small nation, they organize their entire society around these skills, making them the very foundation of their civilization. Soma finally understands his own predicament. As the eldest royal son, failing to possess these essential skills makes him a political failure. Camila tells him he has every right to hate her, but Soma is genuinely confused by the sentiment. She explains that if she had held back or if the results were different, he wouldn't have been exiled and could have stayed with his family. However, the young man finds the idea of hating her for being honest and not cheating to be completely illogical. To him, the results of that biased assessment carry very little weight. Camila argues that it upended his entire life, but Soma reiterates that his only true passion is magic, even if he shouldn't be so blunt about it. In fact, he feels he should thank her. By ending his royal prospects, she freed him from his family duties to focus entirely on his magic. Caught off guard, the girl eventually smiles and agrees with his unique perspective. Now she's determined to master every aspect of magic alongside him. 1 year passes and Soma attempts to cast a fire spell, but absolutely nothing happens. Ina notes that she's seen him attempt this over 100 times, and honestly, not a single thing has changed. Soma claims he's learned plenty, even though his lack of research led him straight into a dead end. He knew from the start that mastering magic wouldn't be a walk in the park. Since everything is going exactly as expected, he's perfectly fine continuing his routine, even if he hasn't seen any results yet. Skeptical, Ina asks him if all this wasted energy is actually worth the effort. He explains that if meaning is tied solely to success, then any failure is ultimately a waste of time, no matter how much work you put in. Soma admits that by that definition, his actions are useless. But finding the intrinsic value in one's efforts is a different story entirely. To him, whether something is effective or not is just one narrow way of measuring its true worth. A single action can ripple out and connect to countless other things. Even a dead end can hold immense value in the grand scheme of things. Ina struggles to follow his logic, so Soma admits he might not be making much sense. He used today's practice as a concrete example, even though he knew he wouldn't actually achieve a breakthrough. His bluntness catches Ina off guard, but he doubles down, insisting that today's routine was incredibly valuable for another reason. That value came from the chance to deepen their relationship through this very conversation, causing the young lady to blush and stammer. Over the past year, her presence and her curiosity have become a cherished part of his daily life. Noticing her softened expression, he asks if he's finally earned her trust, noting how cautious and guarded she had been until now. Ina asks if he was simply waiting for her to let her guard down, and he confirms it, explaining that honesty is the only way they can truly communicate. She agrees, admitting she's a suspicious figure and that she would doubt herself if she were in his shoes, though Soma insists he never meant to imply she was untrustworthy. He tells her it's okay, and that he simply wants to understand the burden she's been carrying. It was obvious she had something on her mind, and recalling his promise to help, he's been waiting for this chance. Finally, Ina gives in and decides to reveal everything. It turns out people consider her a total failure. She explains that during her coming-of-age aptitude assessment, the same time he took his, she supposedly failed, leading Soma to assume she had no magical talent. However, she reveals her results were actually excellent. She had unlocked a rare special class, the mage. Soma playfully teases that she's just bragging, which she quickly denies. Still, he can't wrap his head around why someone with her potential was labeled a failure. She explains that everyone was initially thrilled by her rare talent, but that joy turned to ash when it became clear she couldn't cast a single spell. Unlike skills that require years of practice, Soma knows this type of innate ability should work instantly. He recalls Camila mentioning how primitive this kingdom's magical research actually is. While it's bizarre she's struggling, he finally understands the source of her useless reputation. To investigate, he asks her to demonstrate exactly what happens when she tries to cast. Ina agrees and attempts to conjure a flame. As a special class mage with royal divine protection, a simple magical torch should be effortless for her. Despite everyone's encouragement, the spell fails completely, shocking those around her. She spent months researching and experimenting, but it was all to no avail. Days turned into months of fruitless effort, until Soma realizes something. He suspects the reason no one found a solution is that they weren't looking for the right problem. Ina clarifies that if the court mages had spotted an anomaly, they would have fixed it instantly. Since they found nothing, they assumed she was simply defective. Soma counters that maybe they just weren't looking close enough. He asks for her permission to intervene, though Ina is completely baffled by his plan. With a swift and precise motion, the young man makes a cut to her magical flow. Startled, Ina asks what he just did, but Soma simply reassures her and tells her to try again. She takes a deep breath and utters the word, fire. Her eyes widen in disbelief as a brilliant flame erupts from her palm, a perfect, spontaneous fireball. The flame flickers out quickly, but Soma encourages her, noting it was just the beginning. She tries once more, and this time, the magic holds steady. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Ina thanks him profusely. Soma just smiles, gently telling her to dry her tears so they can both celebrate her success. Later, Soma reflects on the breakthrough. He didn't just solve Ina's problem. He also gained valuable insight into how magic functions in this world. Seeking more answers, he asks his teacher if it's true that a person's magical potency can never truly decline. Camila confirms this theory, but emphasizes that output depends entirely on the effort and concentration a mage exerts during the casting process. She explains that if a mage's skill level is insufficient to parry or defend against an attack, they are forced to rely on raw evasion instead. Soma remains skeptical, having just witnessed a decline in a special class mage like Ina. He argues there must be a hidden reason, but Camila notes there are always exceptions. She explains that those in the special class often defy basic logic, making their failures just as inexplicable as their triumphs. Soma silently ponders this mystery. Camila realized he'd come up with another insane plan. If those in the special classes possessed such incredible power, then surely they could teach him the secrets of magic. Confused, Ina asked how he'd even reached the conclusion that she could be his teacher. He knew special class students were eccentric, but he'd seen her use magic with his own eyes. He wasn't asking her to explain the theory, he just wanted to experience the reality. Since her magical prowess was undeniable, he hoped she'd share what she knew. Realizing he was calling in the favor she owed him from yesterday, Ina knew she had no choice but to comply. She told him to stand ready and began explaining the incantations while gathering mana in her palm, but the hero suddenly interrupted her. He questioned the very concept of charging magic. Ina snapped back that magic is simply magic. If he couldn't even feel it in his hand, how could he ever hope to wield it? Without that physical sensation, the concept remained out of reach. He needed a way to truly feel the mana. Sensing danger, Ina grew wary of his intentions. His solution was simple. He wanted her to blast him with her most powerful spell so he could understand it firsthand. Ina was stunned, but she knew arguing was useless once he'd made up his mind. She warned him to brace himself, as this was definitely going to sting. Chanting the incantation, she called upon her power to manifest. A searing heat surged forth, ready to incinerate anything in its path. Sword principle, dragon god's protection, mind's eye, and spiritual focus. Even with these legendary skills active, the hero still couldn't grasp the essence of magic. Without further hesitation, the girl unleashed a blazing fire arrow directly at him. He realized that if he could cut it, he could understand it. He activated a barrage of ultimate skills: God Slayer, Dragon Slayer, Absolute Slash, and the 10,000 Demon Blade. Realizing his shortcut had failed, he knew he had to take this more seriously. Ina, baffled, asked what he'd done, but he simply claimed to have dispelled the spell, a feat she insisted was impossible. He nonchalantly explained that to him, slicing through magic was no different than cutting through the air itself. As he walked away, he lamented his lack of progress. If he didn't find a breakthrough soon, his situation would only grow more dire. Later that day, he crossed paths with Lena. He offered a warm greeting, but she immediately averted her gaze, clearly avoiding eye contact. He noted how well she looked and mentioned he'd love for her to call him brother again, but she coldly replied that such a thing was no longer possible. Noticing her exhaustion, he suggested they take a walk outside, reminding her that it had been far too long since they'd spent any time together. Lena cried out his name in desperation. While she appreciated his kindness, she flatly rejected his invitation, claiming she had no time for such trivialities, and urged him to abandon his useless pursuits. Declaring that every second of her time was precious, she walked away, leaving the hero lost in thought. Later, he recounted the encounter to Camila, wondering if these years had been too harsh on Lena, or if she had grown up harboring a hidden resentment he failed to notice. Camila noted that his attempt to reconnect had clearly backfired, proving that even he couldn't keep everything under his control. At her 5th birthday ball, Lena thanked the guests for their praise, expecting the day to be the happiest milestone of her young life. This was the day the family finally assessed Suma's abilities, and Lena hoped her brother would emerge as a brilliant master of both military craft and the arts. But when he failed to appear, a sense of dread took hold, and she sought out her mother for answers. Lena asked where Suma was, and with a cold expression, her mother commanded her to follow her into the office. There, her mother delivered a chilling decree. From this moment on, her brother was dead to them. He simply never existed. In that moment of cold clarity, the young girl accepted the harsh reality. Her childhood innocence was shattered that day, leaving her haunted by a recurring dream of her brother vanishing into the woods as he left the estate forever. She knew she should move on, but she couldn't shake her curiosity about his eagerness to leave, or the mysterious glow she saw following him into the depths of the forest. Suddenly, her teacher's voice snapped her back to reality, asking if she was paying attention to the lecture on how her parents secured the nation's peace. The teacher warned her to focus, lest she end up like that talentless failure, prompting Lena to coldly tell her to watch her tongue. Recalling the family's erasure of him, she reminded the teacher that such a man didn't exist, as she prepared to take her place as the sole heir of the Newman family. Suma was supposed to stand where she was now, but he simply didn't have what it takes to lead. Fortunately, Lena possessed a remarkable natural talent, inheriting the swordsman skill, the same legendary ability held by her father, Sir Klaus. She thought back to her brother, remembering how he had once been just as passionate about their shared future. But it was all a lie, a delusion she could no longer pretend never happened. As the family heir, she felt she shouldn't even acknowledge his existence, adhering strictly to her family's cold decrees. Yet, the more nonsensical those rules became, the more she loathed seeing him act like such a carefree fool. She refused to give in to this lingering attachment, even if it meant destroying everything she held dear. Yet she still couldn't bring herself to eliminate him. Truly, if she could just wipe him from her life forever, it would be a massive relief. Lost in these dark thoughts, she quietly makes her way through the dense forest. From the shadows, she keeps a watchful eye on him, observing his every move with clinical precision. She overhears him admit that since things have escalated this far, he'll just have to speak his mind, as he can't think of a better solution. Lena is baffled by who he's talking to, until Ina speaks up, scolding him for standing still like a statue while a spell was being cast. He almost ended up roasted, leaving Lena deeply irritated. Just as she wonders what they're up to, the hero suddenly turns his gaze directly toward her hiding spot. She's stunned that he could sense her. Back at the estate, her high-level isolation stealth spell made her invisible to everyone, though he had managed to spot her once before. She tries to convince herself it's just a coincidence, while Ina asks what's wrong, and Suma admits he can't quite explain the sensation. He asks Ina if she senses anyone else nearby, but she insists they're alone as they both scan the surrounding trees. Suddenly, the young man points exactly to where Lena is standing, and in the next heartbeat, her concealment breaks and she is revealed. Ina is shocked, having been certain no one was there, while Lena finally accepts the reality. He really can see through her magic. A tense, cold greeting passes between the two as they finally face one another. After a heavy silence, the young man suggests they settle things with a duel, just like they used to do. Lena gives a sharp nod of agreement, and Suma asks Ina to step back before picking up a simple wooden stick, the same kind he used for fencing practice. Looking at him, Lena thinks he hasn't changed a bit. He's still the same oblivious boy who understands nothing of the world. He used to perform those ridiculous, clumsy movements with such unearned confidence, and even now his stance is amateurish, an insult to a master fencer like herself. She declares that she will put an end to this pathetic display once and for all. With the air thick with tension, Lena and Suma prepare to clash in a decisive battle. Both fighters take their stances as the girl announces the start of the duel. Without hesitation, she unleashes the opening blow. Her strength is incomprehensible, a catastrophic power held by only a select few, yet she holds back just enough to ensure his survival. She activates her special class abilities, Swordsman, Spirit Focus, and Guanyaki. Following through, she executes a second nature strike. The blow connects, but the boy remains unscathed. Instead, a sudden counterflick lands squarely on her forehead. She's in total shock, unable to fathom how a non-special class could stand his ground through anything other than a miracle. Suma tells her to quit joking around, treating the life-or-death struggle like mere child's play. Gritting her teeth in frustration, she lunges forward, feeling mocked by his effortless defense. She pushes her special class skills to the limit, calling out the Spirit Focus, Tanuki Strike. Suma remains completely composed, casually dodging her flurry before poking her on the forehead once more. Her world begins to crumble. If she truly is this outclassed, then her entire understanding of power has been a mistake. She struggles to process Suma's godlike skill and her own humiliating situation. Desperate to land a hit, she chains her skills into the special class move, Heaven's Intent, Glimmer of Light. Our hero acknowledges her raw effort but bluntly tells her that she still lacks proper training. Refusing to back down, Lena unleashes her ultimate technique, 100 blooming petals. Yet again, his stick finds her forehead, shattering the ego she's built up from a year of constant praise. The hero realizes the root of her problem. Her overwhelming talent meant she never had a sparring partner who could actually challenge her. She admits the truth. Because no one could match her special class rank, she has spent her life isolated and fueled by hidden jealousy. With a final desperate charge, she pours her soul into her heaven's own intentions and the extreme skill, failure. For a full year, she poured her blood, sweat, and tears into her swordsmanship, only to be struck on the forehead yet again. Soma tells her it's fine, but her movements betray her frustration. She wonders if this entire year of training was just a waste of time. Refusing to give up, she steels her resolve and launches one final desperate strike. She unleashes the heavenly sword, Star Sword, a secret technique fueled by human determination and a limit-breaking spirit. Yet, Soma slices through her ultimate move with effortless grace. A moment later, she's flat on the ground, forced to face the crushing reality of her defeat. The hero sits beside her, offering a warm smile and calling her final gambit nothing short of wonderful. He admits it was a close call, acknowledging her incredible growth and undeniable talent as a swordsman. As he gently strokes her head, a deep blush creeps across her face. She is transported back to the memory of him doing the exact same thing, praising her natural gift for the blade. In that moment, she realizes her memories are real. This man truly is her long-lost older brother. Soma mentions that he's losing momentum, lamenting how difficult it is to improve without a proper sparring partner. Seeing his dilemma, the girl stands up with a look of renewed determination. With a firm voice, she declares that she will be the partner he's looking for. Ina sighs and prepares to head home, leaving Lena to worry if she was the cause of the sudden departure. Soma wants to experiment with risky ideas like channeling magic into his brain, but the girls put a stop to his reckless training for the day. They warn him that he's playing with fire, but he argues that a little risk is necessary if ordinary methods won't unlock his magic. Lena laughs, noting how much they act like real siblings, before Ina bids them farewell and departs. As Ina walks alone, she can't help but marvel at the incredible display of power she just witnessed. To be special class is to be a gifted genius, yet Soma defeated her effortlessly, a feat no ordinary mage could ever hope to achieve. Remarkably, she was the one he chose to guide him through the mysteries of magic. Reflecting on it, she felt truly fortunate to have crossed paths with Soma. Suddenly, a voice called out to her, declaring that she had finally been found. It was Albert, who explained his long search and his shock at finding her in a place like this. He noted how much time had slipped away before formally addressing her as princess. Meanwhile, deep within the shadows, a group of cloaked men gather around a table to plot. An elder questions the report, but the other insists he confirmed the truth days ago. They agree that the time has finally come for them to emerge from the darkness. Every move they make is dedicated to the glory of the Magician King. Elsewhere, Ina quietly observes her friends as they continue their training. Lena asks her brother if he's prepared for her next move, and he gives her the signal to proceed. Without hesitation, she unleashes the formidable dragon blessing sword law. She manages to force him into a block, earning a wonderful from the boy before a playful poke to the head. However, he quickly challenges her, asking what the point is if she just stops her momentum there. Though she focused only on the initial strike, the hero admits her effort was just enough to earn a passing grade. He notes it'll be a while before she can actually land a hit, a challenge she's determined to meet. Soma apologizes to Ina for the wait, but she insists the battles were far too entertaining to be boring. She isn't one to lie. She wouldn't sit around just for the sake of keeping them company. Since her time is precious, Soma makes a proposition to ensure she spends it even more wisely. He suggests they develop a secret signal in case she's ever kidnapped, leaving her completely baffled. Ina doubts she'll ever actually need the signal, but Soma insists it's vital to prepare for the worst. She wonders if he would even bother saving her from an abduction, and the hero gives a firm yes. Thinking it's a joke, she's stunned when Soma vows to rescue her no matter the cost. Flustered, Ina blushes and apologizes, though Soma assures her she's done nothing wrong. She abruptly ends the talk and bolts, leaving Lena to ask what he'd do if she were the one kidnapped. Soma admits that's a much tougher question, which his sister doesn't quite understand. He explains that since she's training to defend herself, she shouldn't need a savior in the first place. If she wants a rescue, she'd have to stop training, leaving Ina feeling like she's just making things awkward. Camila shifts the mood back to their previous discussion about the store, offering some vital world history. She defines humanity as a collective term for humans, demi-humans, spirits, monsters, and vampires. When asked why they share that title, Soma realizes it can't be based on appearance, or the undead would be included. The distinction is actually simple. A race is only part of humanity if they possess their own sovereign nation. Since phantoms and lost souls can't build countries, they aren't considered part of the official 5 races. Soma asks about the dwarves, but Camila explains they're far too rare to be classified as a major race anymore. Soma then deduces that Camila herself is a pure-blood dwarf, catching her completely off guard. She's shocked he figured it out, though Soma thinks it's obvious to anyone who actually pays attention. She laments how people overlook dying races, jokingly mentioning how slowly her own kind ages. Getting back on track, she asks if he knows how the word humanity was originally coined. Soma correctly identifies that ancient magicians were the ones who officially established the designation. Before that, constant racial wars nearly drove several species, like the hobbits, to the brink of total extinction. Magicians were originally created to serve as a common enemy for humanity to end their internal divisions, but this foolish plan failed to have any real effect. When the young man asks why this history matters to him, she explains that he is destined to leave his country behind and begin a grand journey. Suma is confused, but Camila knows that as long as there is a place to learn magic, he will seek it out, and those lands will surely be inhabited by mages. He realizes she is warning him to choose his allies wisely, though he knows he can't take action until he finally reaches adulthood. The focus shifts back to the weight of Suma's ongoing battles. She reflects on her past as a total failure, remembering how she disappointed everyone before eventually running away in shame. Albert, one of the 4 divine commanders known as the God of Death, asks if she plans on returning to the Sorcerer King's side anytime soon. These men are only called gods because of their high status, yet the old version of her would have been honored to know someone so powerful needed her. But things have changed. She now has true friends who are waiting for her to come home. Seeing her resolve, Albert realizes she has already made her choice, leaving him to wonder if his arrival was poorly timed after all. She offers a faint smile, dismissing his worries as a mere trifle before firmly confirming her decision to stay. Elsewhere, a man apologizes for the delay before announcing the official start of their plan in his capacity as a heavenly general. Albert apologizes for the setback, but insists the operation must be completed this very day, regardless of the pressure it puts on the group. He explains the delay was necessary, though he notes that if she had been more cooperative, they wouldn't have to risk the quality of the plan by rushing. He vows to bring her back personally, commanding the others to fulfill their duties for the ultimate glory of the Lord of Magic. Meanwhile, Ina sighs to herself, overcome by a sudden wave of loneliness. Suddenly, the cold steel of a sword is pressed against the back of her head as a voice sternly commands her not to move. However, the tension breaks when the girl realizes the person behind her is actually Lena. Ina begs her to stop before she has a heart attack, but Lena playfully claims she was just practicing a surprise for her older brother. Ina fails to see the logic, wondering if threatening someone with a lethal weapon is taking the joke a bit too far. Lena asks why she assumed the threat was merely a joke. Is there something strange about pointing a blade at a mage? Terrified, Ina flinches and shuts her eyes tight. Sheathing her sword with a sigh, Lena scoffs at how utterly defenseless the girl is. When Ina looks confused, Lena explains that without her intervention, Ina would already be dead. She must stay vigilant. The mage asks if she's truly safe, still struggling to grasp Lena's true intentions. Lena admits she gets annoyed seeing her brother so close to Ina, but she doesn't hate her enough to actually kill her. It wasn't a joke, but a grim warning. She needs to realize the danger mages face, especially since she and the brother were wandering without guards. While her brother could likely hold his own, Ina is a sitting duck. Lena had been waiting for a chance to catch her alone to deliver this lesson. Ina pleads with her not to pull stunts like that, but Lena insists the shock was necessary for the message to truly sink in. Regardless, Lena warns her to be careful. If anyone else had found her first, it would have ended in tragedy. Suddenly, a violent burst of magic strikes Lena out of nowhere. Ina spins around in shock, only to find Albert standing behind them. He declares it was a shockwave and commands Ina to get away from the girl immediately. Ina tries to explain that Albert has it all wrong, and that Lena wasn't actually trying to hurt her. Albert cryptically muses that allowing her to live would only lead to a far deeper, more exquisite sense of despair. He considers this moment a blessing, perhaps even divine guidance from the Lord of Magic himself. Albert tells Ina not to worry. He won't kill the girl yet, as she could still serve as a perfect victim. He claims the King of Magic is summoning her, but Ina stands her ground and firmly refuses to go. Albert interprets her defiance as a lack of concern for Lena's life, leaving the mage horrified by his cold, twisted logic. Ina screams that her father will never forgive this, but Albert insists he's simply following the Master of Magic's divine will. Albert realizes negotiation is off the table, deciding to take her by force, just as he planned. Within moments, Ina is engulfed in magic and slips into unconsciousness. Satisfied, he prepares to depart, confident that his master will be thrilled with the unexpected prizes he's secured. According to the mother, Lena had been skipping class weekly, but since she planned to attend next month, it didn't seem like a cause for concern. The teacher admitted that when Lena vanished today, she assumed it was just another routine absence and saw no need to report it, expecting her back by tomorrow. Realizing the teacher was clueless, the woman offered an apology, while the teacher stood there hesitating until the mother bowed once more. Trembling, she bowed and hurried out, leaving Camila to exhale a heavy sigh as she watched her leave. Camila questioned why such an incompetent woman was hired in the first place, only to be told that despite her flaws, she was still better than most candidates. Camila argues that firing her isn't that simple, but this latest incident provides more than enough grounds. For now, they must focus on their next move. The teacher notes that Lena vanished between 1 and 2 hours ago. While she was present for lunch, no one can confirm if she's still within the mansion. Since she was last seen eating with her mother, she was either abducted or slipped out on her own, and the latter seems far more likely. When asked why, she scoffs, pointing out that no one could breach their full power barrier undetected. If an intruder were present, she would have sensed them instantly. Camila asks for their next steps, but the woman has a question of her own first. The teacher knew this day would come and promises to keep it a secret. In reality, she was looking for an excuse to leave as well. Camila wasn't surprised, reminding her that she's always been the one to clean up these messes, and this time is no different. With that, she turns and heads for the door. Upon stepping out, she's intercepted by Suma, who asks if she has any leads or a starting point for the search. Camila accuses him of eavesdropping, but he casually claims he merely overheard some gossip while strolling through the hall. Word had already spread about Lena's disappearance and the subsequent conversation with her mother. Relieved that he's already informed, she decides to begin the search immediately, telling him to continue his studies alone while she's away. When Suma asks for a destination, she reveals her plan to scout the evil forest and beyond, leaving the young man to his own devices. The teacher was stunned. She fully expected him to beg to come along, but he bluntly stated he wouldn't be following her. As they trek through the woods, she questions his presence, but he corrects her. He isn't following her. He's leading the way. With no time to waste, the duo pushes forward, sprinting through the dense foliage at breakneck speeds. Camila questions the route, but the young man is certain, muttering that the kidnappers made a grave mistake by involving her. He's focused on a specific trail, a mark left behind during the struggle of the abduction. This isn't just any trail. Ina was likely taken with Lena, and she left a magical mark that only his eyes can perceive. When Camila presses him on his motives, he coldly dismisses her, stating she's simply a useful asset for the time being. Confused, she asks how he even knew they were taken, and he reveals that discovering the kidnapping was a stroke of pure luck. After finding the mansion empty, he realized Ina was gone. Camila wonders why he didn't give chase the very second it happened. He explains that teleportation magic was used, meaning he only has a general direction and must prepare for a multi-day hunt. The kidnappers are clearly high-level mages or well-equipped, suggesting they're about to face a very dangerous adversary. Camila suddenly realizes the roles have flipped. She's the one following his lead now, and the realization leaves her shaken. She's disturbed by his eerie composure, but he admits that while his face remains stoic, his hands won't stop shaking. Despite his calculated exterior, his inner turmoil is evident, making Camila wish he'd just let his emotions out. They eventually break out into an open field, but the trail goes cold as the magical marks finally vanish. He warns her to stay alert and keep quiet. They are deep in pursuit and can't afford to give away their position. Suma suggests scouting the surrounding area to gauge how much ground they've gained, and Camila quickly agrees to the plan. As she watches him work, she feels a sense of inadequacy, genuinely amazed by the young man's competence and drive. Their immediate priority is locating the nearest city, a task he believes will be easy enough to handle. Following the path, they soon stumble upon a signpost pointing them directly toward the urban center. They stumbled upon what looked like a village, a discovery they hadn't anticipated. Stepping inside would immediately blow their cover as outsiders, but they desperately needed intel. Camila insists they stop overthinking and just move. Suma laments his failure, realizing things went exactly as he feared. He knows he can't keep leaning on his teacher like a crutch. Out of nowhere, an elderly woman approaches him, sensing the heavy burden weighing on his soul despite his recent conversations. He explains his situation. He's a stranger in these lands and needs to know the dangers ahead before making his next move. The old woman finally understands why the other villagers turned him away, leaving Suma confused by her cryptic tone. She explains it's a dark, forgotten history. There's an altar nearby, a former shrine to a god that hasn't been touched in a century. Suma realizes this place was once used to summon a malevolent deity. The woman confirms it, explaining that the locals are terrified to even mention it. This chaotic god descended centuries ago with the intent to wipe out humanity, only to be thwarted by a legendary hero. Those who worshipped this evil entity became known as wizards. Suma, undeterred, asks how long the journey to the altar takes. She warns him it's a day's trek, urging him to stay away. Even without the dark god, the path is crawling with lethal monsters. Suma insists he has no choice but to go and asks for a map. Seeing his resolve, she sketches out the route, noting there's nothing but ruin ahead. He offers his sincere thanks for the invaluable intel, but she humbly brushes it off, simply happy to have been of service. Sensing she has her own burdens, Suma offers to help her with anything she needs as repayment. After a moment's hesitation, she asks him to listen to her story. Not because it's grand, but because she needs someone to hear it. She begins the tale of a foolish old man, a story that started about a year ago. Back then, they encountered a young girl in a village much like this one, and they knew instantly she was a lost soul. They knew harboring her would lead to trouble, but their compassion won out, and they welcomed her into their home. Their plan was originally to feed her and send her on her way, but fate had other ideas. Even after resting, she remained deathly pale. The old woman realized the girl's wounds weren't physical, but etched deep into her heart. Still, they were powerless to help. They knew she was fighting an internal battle, but they were too hesitant to ask. Then, out of nowhere, a genuine smile lit up her face as she announced she'd finally made a friend. From that day on, the girl began to smile more often. Even though they hadn't done anything for her, her happiness brought them joy. They began to cherish her like their own granddaughter, though a shadow of confusion still occasionally crossed her face. Those moments of sadness were becoming rarer, yet she still seemed to carry a heavy burden, until recently, when she finally laughed. When Suma noted that she was smiling, the old woman clarified that this wasn't just a mask, it was a true smile from the heart. They realized that someone, somewhere, had finally saved her soul. This realization filled them with joy. They knew her true identity, but they kept it secret to protect her from local rumors. Still, they felt they had to share the news of her safety with the man searching for her. Confused, the hero asked for clarification. The woman explained that they had informed the man that the girl was doing well. When she didn't return, the old woman assumed she had simply gone home, feeling a twinge of sadness that she left without a word. She resigned herself to the fact that their different social standings meant they were destined to part ways. She thanked him for listening to her story, but she had one final favor to ask. She begged him to pass on a message to the girl, a sincere apology for everything. To her surprise, Suma refused. The old woman took it as a normal reaction to such a selfish request and apologized for overstepping. However, the hero clarified. He was going to bring Aina back so she could tell her in person. After all, they both had a lot they needed to say to one another. With a renewed sense of purpose, Suma sets out on his journey, vowing to return with her by his side. Meanwhile, following her abduction, Dina woke up in a cold, damp room that looked exactly like a stone basement. Surveying her surroundings, she quickly realized she was trapped in a prison cell, as no other description seemed to fit. In the corner of the room, she was shocked to find a familiar face. It was Rena, who casually greeted her with a playful, "Good morning." Dina was instantly irritated by her friend's carefree attitude in such a dire situation. The traumatic image of Rena lying defeated on the floor flashed before her eyes again. She was relieved to see her friend unharmed, and though Rena brushed off the concern, she promised that their lives weren't in immediate danger. Still, Rena was confused as to why they were being held captive and asked Dina if she had any idea what was going on. Suddenly, a sickly-looking man with a monocle interrupted, reminding them that their imprisonment was the direct will of the Demon King. Dinah was certain he was lying. She suspected either Albert was acting on his own, or her father's orders had been twisted for someone else's gain. The man noticed her deep in thought and pressed her for an answer, causing her to nervously deflect. She clarified she'd deduced the reason for their capture, quickly outlining her theories and the grim reality of their situation. Rena was stunned to learn that her close friend was actually the daughter of the Demon King. While the explanation helped piece things together, Rena was still plagued by one question. Why were they both locked in this cage? Dina admitted she was just as lost, suggesting they were either intended for sacrifice or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, until a voice cut through the air. Albert approached them, and Dina immediately demanded to know why they'd been taken, though they had already guessed the dark truth. Her suspicions were confirmed when Albert revealed they were indeed meant to be sacrifices, leaving Dina in disbelief that her father would ever permit this. Albert let out a weary sigh, pitying the girls for how deeply they had misinterpreted the current political landscape. Before Dina could argue, Albert's firm voice interrupted her, declaring that the current Demon King was a fraud unworthy of his title. As Dina froze in shock, Albert explained that the demonic people never truly recognized her father, believing only one being had the right to rule. He dismissed those who followed her father as fools, confident that once their true lord was reborn, everyone would realize their mistake. The princess quickly realized that when he spoke of the Demon King, he was referring to the ancient former ruler. He stood firm, reiterating that the mantle of the Demon King was a divine status meant for only one true soul. Dina was baffled. The previous ruler was long dead, yet these fanatics were actually attempting to bring him back to life. Albert explained he'd spent ages preparing the ritual for the king's rebirth, a revelation that left Dina reeling in horror. She doubted such a feat was even possible, but as she calculated the odds, the terrifying purpose of their sacrifice finally clicked. Albert confirmed her fears, explaining that ordinary offerings weren't enough to stir the old king from his eternal slumber. But now the cultists had exactly what they needed. Two children gifted with immense magical potential. Dina tried to intimidate him, warning that he wouldn't get away with this, but Albert was unfazed, his heart set on the king's return. The conspirators planned to wipe out the parody king and his henchmen, sparking a bloody rebellion to reclaim their land from the humans. As the weight of his words sank in, Dina's eyes widened when she noticed Albert had somehow freed himself from his straitjacket. Dina understood the demon's motivations, and surprisingly, he seemed to appreciate her insight. Albert lamented that she wouldn't witness the coming vengeance, yet her sacrifice would serve as the foundation for their grand design. The princess, however, cared little for his schemes and refused to be a pawn in the struggle for the throne. Suddenly, Lena shredded the iron bars and lunged at the demon. Albert remained unfazed, his expression cold as stone. He had anticipated her desperate strike, and before she could even blink, he had already landed a counterblow. As a high-ranking general, Albert's power was overwhelming, and he had come prepared for a fight. As she collapsed, he realized his simple parry might have been a lethal strike. A cruel smile played on his lips. One victim was more than enough to satisfy him, and her death wouldn't hinder his ultimate goal. Dina stepped forward to protect her friend, channeling the Demon King's patronage, a specialized form of high-tier witchcraft. She unleashed a searing fire arrow at the general, but the projectile failed to find its mark. Shock washed over the princess, while Albert was genuinely impressed by her sudden display of magic. He wondered how she had restored her mana so rapidly. His surprise stemmed from the fact that he had personally sealed her powers, a revelation that left Dina completely blindsided. Albert realized she had subconsciously shattered the seal, and before things escalated further, he decided to reveal the truth. It turned out her magical impotence was his doing, a feat he took pride in as a general, noting that not even her own kin had noticed her plight. Dina demanded to know why he would go through such lengths just to suppress her. To Albert, the answer was simple. He wanted to watch the princess drown in a bottomless abyss of despair. He had chosen her as his prey long ago, though even he was surprised by her resilience. Her escape had been a significant thorn in his side. The demon offered a mock bow of gratitude, cold and calculating. To him, even the greatest stories had to reach a bloody conclusion. Fueled by rage, Dina once again tapped into her forbidden witchcraft, invoking the Demon King's patronage. Once more her attack missed, and the backlash left her reeling. Albert mocked her efforts, claiming her magic was child's play before suggesting she rest permanently. As blood trickled from her lips, the demon compared her to a common beetle, a specimen he intended to pin down and study for his own amusement. With a cold sneer, he ground his heel into the girl's hand, savoring every bit of her agony. She barely managed to whisper his name, catching the boy off guard. He expected a broken captive to dissolve into tears, but her defiance only stoked his sadistic hunger. Realizing 2 years of hardship had forged her spirit, a twisted grin spread across his face. Now, he could truly have some fun. He ground his heel into her hand with brutal precision, intensifying the pressure. Yet, despite the agony, Dina bit her lip and refused to let out even a whimper. Her tormentor was visibly rattled. He thought he was dealing with a fragile princess, but her iron will forced him to rethink his approach. Albert mocked her relentlessly, treating her like a caged animal stripped of all agency. He taunted her with the sting of betrayal, refusing to name the traitors just to watch her mind spiral. Her resilience only fueled his obsession to break her, though he knew he had to keep her alive until the ceremony. A cruel idea struck him. Seeing Dinah's fading health, he offered her a deal. Beg for mercy, and he would heal her wounds. He knew she was on the verge of death, and he bet on her fear of pain to finally crush her spirit. The princess refused to succumb to his provocations, enduring the torture in silence. Albert let out a bored sigh, mocking the idea that anyone was coming to rescue her, claiming that hope was a total delusion. Deep down, Dina had already steeled herself, believing that help was a luxury she couldn't afford to dream of. The demon's frustration boiled over. Her silence denied him the satisfaction he craved, so he decided to literally stomp a scream out of her. With sadistic passion, he slammed his boot down again and again, desperate to hear her voice crack in a final cry of despair. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the air, clearly tired of Albert's pathetic gloating. The stranger suggested that if Albert wanted to hear screams so badly, he should be the one making them. Action followed words as a massive burst of magic sent the demon flying. Dina looked up to see the legendary former strongest swordsman standing before her, a beacon of hope slicing through her shroud of despair. The young man turned and apologized for the delay, explaining that Lena's condition was more critical, so he had to prioritize her treatment first. Just as he had promised, he had come to save the princess, even if he was cutting it a bit close. He offered to treat her injuries before they made their escape, asking Dina if she had enough strength left to use healing magic on herself. The princess closed her eyes in frustration, forced to admit she was too weak to manage it. He sighed, realizing the burden fell on him, but Dina waved him off, pleading with him to forget her and save Rena instead. However, the young man didn't quite grasp the urgency of her request. Without waiting for an explanation, the swordsman prepared his stance, warning the princess to stay still. He channeled every ounce of his skill, divine protection, intuition, and secret sword techniques, to weave a complex healing spell. As the light faded, he let out a weary sigh. His sword of goodwill technique healed others by sharing his own life force, and performing such a feat twice in a row was taking a massive toll on his body. But to him, the exhaustion was a small price to pay. Dina's safety was the only thing that mattered, and he reassured her that her body would finally be at peace. The princess began to examine her body, realizing that all her wounds and abrasions had completely vanished. The young man smiled, relieved that his intervention had been a total success. Once Dina recovered from the shock, she frantically reminded her savior that Lena still needed help with her deep wounds. But as he had promised earlier, he had already managed to heal her as well. She let out a heavy sigh of relief, but noticed the young man still looked troubled, though she didn't understand why. He began to berate himself for being late and breaking his promise to the princess, apologizing for his perceived incompetence. These words infuriated Dina, who screamed at the swordsman, insisting that Lena's life was the priority and he had nothing to apologize for. He had kept his word and come to their rescue, and as far as the princess was concerned, that was all that mattered. Soma tried to object again, but she cut him off, firmly stating that everything was okay. She tugged at his sleeve, desperate to leave the cursed place, and he was more than ready to oblige. However, the warrior explained that leaving immediately was no longer an option. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as a sphere of intense magical power manifested, taking the shape of a portal. The swordsman took a combat stance, preparing to unleash high-tier techniques like Godslayer, Dragonslayer, and the Blade of 10,000 Demons. A haughty, demonic voice echoed from the shadows, mocking the annoying brat who had dared to interfere with the princess. But the demon, Albert, didn't care about his own popularity or the boy's opinion. He menacingly informed the young man that the girls were required sacrifices for the Demon King and weren't going anywhere. Dina was stunned to see him standing. She was certain the previous attack had hit its mark, but the demon had already regenerated. Albert explained that he only allowed himself to be distracted because he feared showing any weakness before his ruler. The swordsman didn't need any more excuses. He already knew the demon's nature and found him absolutely revolting. If he had stayed down, the young man might have spared him out of pity, but now the fight was back on. The man was stunned by the youth's words, but his shock quickly dissolved into mocking laughter. However, that laughter instantly curdled into pure rage as the demon bristled at the boy's arrogant tone. As waves of magical energy began to swirl around the young swordsman, Albert sighed in frustration, realizing he truly despised children. To him, Kids were just insolent brats who didn't know their place. And while this boy clearly didn't realize who he was dealing with, Albert knew death was imminent. Yet the young man refused to back down, completely unfazed by the demon's intimidation as he began weaving his own magical techniques. To Albert's shock, the boy effortlessly dispelled his attack, leaving the demon baffled as to how such a refined spell could be neutralized so easily. The youth then threw Albert's own words back at him, mocking the demon's supposed knowledge of knowing one's place. The swordsman even suggested that the demon had gravely miscalculated the massive gap in their respective power levels. A shiver ran down Albert's spine as he sensed a hidden threat within the boy, and though he prepared to show him true despair, he ultimately decided it wasn't worth the effort. Consumed by spite, the demon convinced himself that the boy's success was mere luck, and that he had become dangerously overconfident. On the other hand, the young man was genuinely disappointed to see his opponent blinded by such petty arrogance. Suddenly sensing a shift in the air, the youth reached down and drew a simple wooden sword. Now he stood ready for battle, dual-wielding his wooden blades with lethal intent. Meanwhile, in a different corner of the world, a brutal skirmish was unfolding as a sinister figure loomed over a mysterious girl. She spoke calmly to herself, having wandered these desolate lands for ages without encountering a single soul. Until now, 8 suspicious figures had been plotting in the shadows, but they would no longer be a problem. Now, the traveler had one final location to investigate. Suddenly, a cloaked stranger materialized behind her, radiating enough bloodlust to kill the warrior princess, but she saw him as nothing more than a fool. Before the assassin could even process his failure, he was cleaved in two by her massive axe, proving that the princess was truly unstoppable. As he breathed his last, he spat a curse at the black steel princess, but she met his hatred with a cold, hollow gaze. With one final swing, she silenced his screams forever, though she quietly regretted drawing so much unwanted attention to herself. With heavy reluctance, the princess checked the final location, hoping there was still some way she could help. Albert fired a flaming arrow directly at the youth, but once again, Soma barely shifted his stance to effortlessly dodge the projectile. Soma then neutralized the magic with his defensive gear, leaving the demon horrified and unable to grasp the boy's true identity. It infuriated him that his magic was being treated like a toy, fueling his suspicion that the boy possessed a legendary hidden class. Desperate, the man launched a massive concentrated fireball, yet the result remained the same. The attack was ruthlessly scattered into nothingness. However, a wicked grin spread across the demon's face, knowing this particular spell carried a hidden shockwave. But Soma didn't break a sweat, managing the secondary blast with ease. His hypothesis was proven. He had used Albert as a live test subject to gauge the limits of high-level demonic abilities. Despite the assault, Soma wasn't a monster, so he offered the demon a final moment to repent for his sins. He wanted his enemy to be able to face his end without the weight of lingering regrets. Insulted, Albert, one of the Demon King's 4 generals and the patron saint of death, vowed to drown the boy in an abyss of despair. Nearby, the Black Steel Princess felt a chilling aura radiating from Soma, a sense of dread she hadn't felt in over a decade. It reminded her of the Body Snatchers, the most feared of the demon clans, and she realized she had to hurry. Upon arriving, she was met with a sky choked by the demon's suffocating dark magic. Having gathered enough energy, Albert funneled the entirety of his power toward the lone swordsman. Soma met the apocalyptic blast with total composure and alacrity. As he dispelled the magic, Dina watched in awe, and the princess could hardly believe the terrifying beauty of the scene before her. Terrified, Albert screamed threats at the swordsman, desperate to keep the boy from closing the distance. Albert couldn't fathom how Soma was still standing, especially since his mission to resurrect the Demon King was far too important to fail. He vowed that his next strike wouldn't miss, promising to grind this insolent hero into fine dust. Albert demanded Soma pay for his arrogance with his life, but to the hero, the demon was nothing more than a loud nuisance. Becoming increasingly irritated, Soma finally considered putting some real effort into the fight. He was baffled that the demon still hadn't realized how outclassed he was, suggesting that surrendering was his only logical option. To Soma, Albert's grand ambitions were trivial, and his life was utterly inconsequential. Enraged by the insult, the demon erupted in a wave of pure fury, unleashing a torrent of dark magic far greater than before. A massive surge of destructive energy hurtled toward the young hero once again. Bracing himself, Soma exhaled and shattered the incoming spell with a single, effortless swing. The demon watched in disbelief as Soma's casual parry somehow left a deep gash across his own body. The general's face twisted in shock, unable to comprehend how a mere human dared to draw his blood. To a high-ranking demon like him, being wounded by a mortal felt like a physical impossibility. Albert screamed more death threats and lunged forward, but Soma swatted the attacks away, reminding the demon of his pathetic weakness. Soma's counterattacks began piling up, leaving the once proud demon battered and broken in a matter of moments. Staring him down, Soma asked if Albert finally regretted laying a finger on his comrades. With a chilling stare, Soma warned that while escape was no longer an option, Albert could still choose between a humble apology or total annihilation. As his wounds closed up, the general snarled at the swordsman, warning him not to play games. Soma was taken aback by the accusation, but he was curious if his opponent had any sense of morality left. He honestly admitted that he felt pity for the creature, as he already had enough burdens without adding another kill to his list. Infuriated by the realization that he was being shown mercy, Albert decided to finally stop holding back and go all out. The general sneered, vowing that the young man would soon regret his arrogance. Without warning, the general shifted his aim, launching a lethal strike at the wounded Dinah and Lena. The Black Steel Princess could only gasp as a devastating spell loomed over the Demon King's daughter. Certain of his victory, the demon believed his final blow was unstoppable, but Soma simply exhaled, coldly remarking that the attack was far too slow. In an instant, the blow was neutralized and shattered into nothingness. The princess stood frozen, unable to process the sheer speed of Soma's intervention. The general was struck with disbelief. Only those mastered in the dark arts should have been able to perceive his movements. Soma didn't care for labels. If the general wanted to view him as a devil, he was perfectly fine with that. An oppressive, suffocating aura began to radiate from the swordsman. Soma had given Albert a chance, but his patience had finally reached its limit, and the demon felt every ounce of that crushing pressure. Desperate, the general lunged forward, combining his spells with a close-range assault. But his efforts were futile. Soma executed a single, flawless technique that sealed the demon's fate. Albert, the feared patron of death and one of the 4 generals, was instantly carved apart by a whirlwind of steel. As the realization of his demise set in, Soma confirmed the grim reality. There would be absolutely nothing left of him. The general was left to regret his foolishness in the next life. Yet even as his adversary faded, Soma offered a final, silent forgiveness. The hero closed his eyes and turned away. The princess tried to explain she had only come to help, but seeing the aftermath, she realized Soma had already handled everything himself. To him, the threat of a great general was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Hearing his nonchalant tone, Dinah looked at him in disbelief, reminding him that he had just slain a legendary high-ranking demon. Soma insisted the general was weak, noting that if he'd known the demon's true rank, he might have actually tried. A terrifying thought the princess couldn't help but agree with. Surveying the massive scale of destruction, she recalled seeing a demon king fall before, but this display of power was on an entirely different level. What baffled her most was that, unlike her, Soma possessed no cheat-like special skills or divine blessings. Regardless of the circumstances, she knew that talent and experience were irrelevant to the path she had chosen to follow. Had the Black Steel Princess met Soma sooner, she might still be chasing the legend of the 7 heavens, but she realized those comparisons were now meaningless. Ultimately, the hero had settled the score on his own terms, and she found herself in complete agreement. He smiled, entrusting everything to her and Dina, but the moment the words left his lips, the young man collapsed into unconsciousness. Scanning the letter, she let out a heavy sigh, paralyzed by the uncertainty of their next move. Her friend had vanished into a demon-infested territory, and she feared they might have already dragged her into the abyss. This entire situation was a powder keg that could ignite a catastrophic global war. If the worst came to pass, she would be forced to strike first to prevent total annihilation. Those who were obsessed with resurrecting the Demon King had eventually transformed into the very monsters they worshipped. These demons were the ultimate enemies of humanity, fueled by a dark faith and a singular desire to see the world crumble. Whether the Overlord truly lived was irrelevant. If he did, the world was doomed. These creatures lurked in the shadows, waiting for the moment to plunge everything into eternal darkness. If these malevolent forces were truly on the move, then Camilla's life was already hanging by a thread. She had always been indifferent to the opinions of others. Perhaps that cold detachment was her only way to survive. She wondered how Camila would handle this. After all, Camila broke things while Soma mended them. A cruel irony. Curiously, the letter ended with a plea to remain unread. After scanning the lines one last time, she crumpled the parchment and watched it vanish into flames. She had tried to shield him from the world's cruelty, but as he matured, she realized she could only stand back and watch him shine on his own journey. Once Soma regained consciousness, he was eager to depart, though a worried Dina questioned if he was truly fit to travel. Soma felt fully recovered after bidding his master farewell, especially with Rina's recovery on the horizon, yet he still questioned if the princess truly wanted him to leave. Hesitating, she masked her deep concern by quickly shifting the conversation back to Rina's condition. Soma shared her hopes, though he spoke with a cryptic finality the princess couldn't grasp, all while a spy watched them from the shadows of a nearby tree. Assuring Dina that her friend was safe, Soma turned his focus toward the princess, demanding to hear her side of the story. She immediately offered a sincere apology. Despite their year-long bond, she had kept him in the dark, but now she vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. Soma accepted her apology, but reminded her that had he failed to save her, the outcome would have been catastrophic, hoping she finally realized the gravity of the danger. Dina understood his point, but she feared that revealing her true origins would drive him away forever. Soma offered a wink and an apology, admitting he should have known more, though he wished she'd been upfront from the start. When he asked about her previous home, the princess grew visibly anxious, struggling to find the right words. Eventually, she confessed that staying in her own territory had become far too dangerous. Seeking safety, she began her journey a year ago, eventually finding a village after passing through this treacherous region. To avoid any trouble with the locals, Dina had waited until nightfall to slip through, but exhaustion eventually forced her to rest. As she pondered her next move, a kind elderly couple discovered her and offered shelter, leading her to leave a grateful note the next morning. When she tried to slip away, the villagers caught her and warmly invited her back any time, a gesture that nearly moved her to tears. Now, she was deeply concerned that Soma was rushing back into action so soon after losing consciousness. Soma rolled his shoulder to loosen up, admitting he was still sore, but insisted it wouldn't stop him, though he'd be unable to fight for a while. He was fully confident that he was fit enough to move out and continue his mission. He turned to the princess for her thoughts, but she found herself bewildered by what he was actually asking of her. He stunned her by suggesting that she would have to continue her journey all alone. He claimed that since they were both solo travelers heading the same way, their meeting was more than just a coincidence. It was fate. Dina looked on, confused, as his logic didn't quite seem to add up. Finally, the young man dropped the act and spoke clearly. He wanted them to travel together. He worried she might find the idea repulsive, but he firmly believed that two were better than one, asking if she agreed. Dina timidly admitted he had a point, yet a lingering doubt continued to weigh heavily on her mind. She feared she would only be a burden and cause him unnecessary trouble, but Soma simply responded with a heavy sigh. Without a word, he reached out and grabbed her hand, sending her heart racing and her face turning a deep shade of crimson. He confidently declared that this was his wish, promising she would never be a burden to him. The hero had no intention of letting his companion go, vowing that the next time danger struck, he would be there to shield her. Dina's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, leaving her completely speechless. Soma suddenly pivoted to a strange metaphor about God watching from the heavens while the world turns below. Once again, his companion was left utterly baffled by what he was trying to convey. He brushed it off as just thinking out loud, shifting the focus to how much he was looking forward to their journey. His friend decided it was best to just nod and go along with it. Back at the tavern, the wind whistled through the room as patrons lounged at their tables. One girl, however, couldn't help but sigh in sheer boredom. As she wallowed in her melancholy, a hooded stranger approached from behind. The somber woman offered the newcomer a drink, but the stranger declined, citing the grim work that lay ahead. Suddenly, flames engulfed a village, trapping a young boy in the inferno. The child never intended for things to go this far. He only wanted his tormentors punished. Yet, the man beneath the robe claimed this massacre was the only way for his vengeance to be fulfilled. Even though the stranger had clearly overdone it, he viewed the total destruction as nothing more than a minor trifle. Before departing, He thanked the boy for his assistance. The man admitted he didn't know when he'd return, but he promised to pray to his god so the young man would have the strength to handle the trials to come. A sudden gust of wind tore leaves from the trees, whipping them through the air. They pelted a traveler, forcing her to squint against the debris. Walking behind the group, she listened as Rena explained that her sixth sense was tingling, signaling trouble ahead. Soma trusted her instincts completely and immediately volunteered to accompany her. Finally reaching her breaking point, Dina snapped and screamed at the two idiots. She had lost count of how many times she'd told them they didn't have time for these detours. Soma vaguely recalled hearing something about a schedule, but he had completely blanked on their agreement. Rena tried to back him up, but the princess ruthlessly ordered them both to shut their mouths. She reminded them that they must reach the next territory within a day or face dire consequences. Soma admitted he heard the warning, but insisted the route looked incredibly suspicious, though he still had no proof to back up his gut feeling. Rena clarified that they'd only avoided trouble so far because of the princess's caution, but she was certain a disaster was looming. Her friends, however, dismissed her concerns as the ramblings of a coward. Dina leaned in and whispered to her friend, worried about the consequences of not telling Soma that the powerful beings they were facing were actually dukes. The girl saw no issue, believing the right moment hadn't arrived yet. She figured they could always break the news to him if a real emergency actually happened. Dina looked on with a heavy heart while her friend rushed ahead to catch up with Soma. The young man closed his eyes with a knowing look, claiming he'd figured out the topic of their secret chat. He assumed Aina was just lonely sleeping by herself, but the princess was horrified, wondering where he got such a scandalous idea. Skeptical, the young man asked if she'd really never experienced those kinds of lonely feelings, even just a little bit. She turned bright red, offering a stuttering denial that didn't sound convincing in the slightest. Her party immediately caught her hesitation, causing the princess to snap at them to be silent in a fit of embarrassment. Despite Rena's outburst, her friend urged her to stop before she accidentally leaked their secret. Deep within the Radial Kingdom lies the territory of Baron Avesta and the northern city of Yester, a notorious wasteland crawling with monsters. Against all odds, the local Adventurers Guild branch was thriving, and staff member Doris Hansel found the chaos surprisingly entertaining. Sheila Lionheart was momentarily lost in thought, reflecting on the hollow life she once led before snapping back to reality. She couldn't help but envy the guests, wishing she could just sit back and enjoy a drink like everyone else. When Sheila asked if she was serious, Doris laughed it off. She wasn't about to risk her job by drinking on the clock. It was a tempting thought, but her strict employment contract, specifically requested by the clients, kept her professionally bound. The upbeat guests asked if she was enjoying herself, but Doris felt more like she was just rotting away in the same spot. Still, watching the rowdy adventurers pass through wasn't the worst way to spend her days. She couldn't help but wonder if she was destined to grow old behind this same desk forever. Noticing Sheila's worried look, Doris quickly played it off as rambling, though her initial excitement for the job had clearly faded. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the room as a stranger asked if he had found the right guild branch. The door swung open, and a terrifying beast with the head of a boar stepped inside. Sheila and Doris immediately jumped into a defensive stance, their hearts racing at the sight. As the boar pushed its way in, the monster explained that he simply wanted to make a flashy first impression. The onlookers were baffled, unable to comprehend where this lunatic in a boar mask had even come from. Rena face-palmed in exasperation, realizing that this time, there was no way she could cover for Nia's antics. Dina wasn't nearly as shocked as the others, having already predicted that something ridiculous was about to happen. The confusion only deepened when everyone realized that the monster was actually just children hiding under a mask. Awkwardly scratching his head, the young man apologized for the chaos and suggested they move past the misunderstanding so he could ask a question. Without missing a beat, he requested permission to officially register with the guild as an adventurer. However, his request was met with a stunned, heavy silence, leaving Soma confused since he thought his unique entrance had gone well. The staff explained that everything had been chaotic from the start, and now Nia was stuck in a difficult position. Doris began to laugh, find it absurdly funny that she was expected to keep up with people operating on such a completely different level. She formally welcomed them to the guild branch, and Hansel stepped forward to introduce herself as well. With the tension broken, the rest of the guild members were told to get back to their daily tasks. The group thanked the staff for the warm reception, and the guild workers prepared to assist them with their needs. Doris insisted they drop the formalities, joking that no matter what happened, she always seemed to end up stuck in this place. When the swordsman looked surprised, she explained she was mostly a figurehead who had only recently been assigned to this specific branch. Dina couldn't help but notice how naturally Doris could communicate, despite being the new girl at the office. Hansel joked that in their line of work, adventurers who looked down on others usually didn't live very long. The guests found that hard to believe, so she simply concluded that her easygoing nature was just part of her charm. Doris decided it was time to get down to business and confirmed that the trio was indeed there to register as adventurers. The three travelers stared back at her in silence, waiting for her evaluation. To her, they looked like children, yet they possessed a level of maturity that far surpassed most of the adults she dealt with. She took a particular interest in Soma, sensing that he was the truly exceptional member of their team. Realizing that sharp minds often lead to high-level skills, she deduced they were the ones who slew the mad boar, a feat usually reserved for elite parties. Now, she intended to test them personally to see if they truly had the mettle to become adventurers. She eventually realized they were only seeking work to fund their travels, a common enough motive for those with a long road ahead of them. Soma hoped to profit by selling monster parts piece by piece, but he couldn't find a single buyer. It turned out the local merchants had no way to export their goods, making Soma realize the issue wasn't a lack of trust, but a total lack of trade. The girl clarified that this was common. Usually, if someone needed something, they were forced to handle the delivery themselves. From this, Rena concluded that the guild would flat-out reject materials brought in by anyone with a questionable reputation. Doris cryptically explained that the guild serves adventurers, a risky profession, and the masters had no interest in inviting unnecessary complications or drama. This harsh reality of society was exactly why every newcomer had to be thoroughly vetted before being accepted. Cutting to the chase, she ordered Soma to take his test first, though he wondered why they weren't being evaluated as a group. Doris grew suspicious, asking if he was truly that afraid to stand alone. By her logic, if he failed, his entire team would be disqualified instantly. Soma suddenly felt the crushing weight of responsibility, realizing his companions' futures rested entirely on his shoulders. While Dina was worried about his nonchalant attitude, Rena remained supportive, confident that Nia would have no trouble at all. Doris then explained the rules. He would spar with her, and his final grade would be determined by his performance during the bout. It was clear to the young man now, this wasn't a duel to the death, but a calculated mock battle. Scratching her forehead with the barrel of her pistol, she added that winning or losing wouldn't actually dictate his assessment. She began to say more, but was interrupted by Sheila, who stepped in to ask if there were any objections to a change of pace. Before Doris could react, Lionheart announced she would be the one to test the boy, much to Hansel's surprise. Sheila gave a firm nod, stepping forward as his new opponent, now armed with a deadly katana. The guild exam officially began, and Soma didn't waste a single second, immediately rushing in for the first strike. He relied on his fundamental swordsmanship and the blessing of the dragon horn, unleashing a powerful longsword swing. His expectations were met instantly when she proved her skill, effortlessly parrying his heavy opening blow. Despite her heavy cloak seemingly impeding her movement, Soma realized the garment was likely designed specifically to handicap her during training. Soma effortlessly parried his opponent's next strike with ease. A smirk played on his lips as he vanished, reappearing instantly to catch her off guard. As he unleashed his assault, the girl leaped back, her katana expertly intercepting every strike from his wooden blade. Rena recognized Sheila's superior strength, though she wasn't surprised, knowing the world was full of hidden masters. Dina exhaled sharply, her eyes failing to track Sheila's blinding speed beneath that heavy cloak. Doris watched the exchange, completely mesmerized by the display of skill. Soma was proving to be far more capable than she'd imagined, yet Sheila was matching him blow for blow. It was the first time anyone had seen the adventurer wield a katana, and her mastery suggested it was her true calling. Hansel was stunned to see her friend finally revealing her true power, as she usually kept her prowess hidden from the world. Doris pondered the reason for this sudden display, eventually concluding that Sheila simply felt like cutting loose. The crowd wondered how much longer this would last, as the match was entirely at the examiner's discretion. Dora noted that once their full potential was gauged, the fight would be brought to a close. Rena sensed that Soma was fighting with a hidden purpose, though she couldn't fathom why Sheila was following suit. Dora was equally puzzled, but she knew the swordswoman was no fool, She clearly had her own motives. The observer was certain that something, or someone, had piqued the girl's interest. Rena wasn't surprised by Sheila's curiosity toward Soma, though the princess was more impressed by her friend's sharp intuition. The duel raged on, the sound of clashing blades echoing through the arena. The Demon King's daughter felt the end drawing near, the intensity of the battle becoming almost physically painful to witness. Dora sensed that both fighters were preparing to end it with one final move, which left her feeling slightly uneasy. As their eyes locked, Sheila remained stoic while Soma radiated an aura of calm, relaxed confidence. Soma was left with only a single one-handed sword in his grip. He prepared to unleash a flurry of advanced techniques, including high shooting, mental concentration, and his signature lightning shot. Suddenly, Dora fired her pistol into the air, signaling an immediate end to the exam before the battle escalated further. While she wouldn't have stopped them if they were determined to clash, the official test was over, and she requested they postpone their duel for another time. The young man stood down upon seeing the signal, and Sheila was satisfied with everything she had witnessed. Hazel was eager to announce the results immediately, but since the battlefield wasn't an ideal setting, she suggested they head back first. She was willing to bet that everyone already knew the outcome. They had passed the trial with flying colors. From that moment on, they were officially recognized as adventurers, though they lacked any immediate way to prove their new status. Soma wasn't entirely sure what Dora meant, but the concept of guild cards was something he had heard of before. Dora was surprised he knew about them, noting that while she would act as their sponsor, they still needed to visit a main branch to receive their physical cards. Dina quickly asked for clarification on what would happen if they arrived at another guild office without the proper documentation. Dora assured them that nearby towns shouldn't pose a problem, though she joked that passing the next hurdle might require some acting skills. Rena agreed there were workarounds, but retaking the test at every single branch sounded exhausting, so she turned to Soma to decide their next move. Even the young man was at a loss, wondering which nearby city was actually authorized to issue their official identification. After a moment of thought, Hazel pointed to Lumbberg on the map, noting they could reach the city in about a week by carriage. A week-long journey by cart meant the city was a considerable distance away. Dora didn't deny the distance, but she insisted that the trip to Lumbberg was absolutely worth the effort regardless. As the seat of the Baron's power, Lumbberg was the region's most prosperous hub for trade and information, making it the perfect destination. However, she was curious about their ultimate motivation, as their next steps would depend entirely on their personal goals. With a calm expression, the young man admitted that his journey was fueled by a singular passion: the pursuit of magic. The woman was stunned to learn he was a magician, having previously mistaken him for a master swordsman. Soma admitted that Doris wasn't entirely wrong, as he didn't actually possess any natural aptitude for magic. This revelation left her even more baffled, questioning why he would choose to travel the world without any power. To him, the reason was simple. Since he lacked magic, he wandered the land in search of a way to finally obtain it. Dora and Gala stared at the hero in sheer disbelief, though he remained completely oblivious to their shock. In a society where talent dictates one's worth, the boy was relentless in his quest. But Sheila was a different story entirely. The elf pulled her hood lower, but when her friend checked on her, she replied that she felt safe enough to trust them. With a decisive motion, she pulled back her hood, finally revealing her true appearance to the young man. Introducing herself as Sheila, the elf had a specific request. She needed them to escort her to the ancient ruins beyond Lumbberg. While most dismissed the location as a mere fairy tale, these ruins were far more than just weathered, ordinary stones. A mysterious man watched from afar, noting that while he'd given them some leeway, the ancient records suggested no ordinary human should have survived. Stepping over the corpses he'd left in his wake, the man prepared to investigate. If the results were poor, he'd have to scrap his entire plan. He then recalled his decision to leave one survivor alive, a witness who would ensure this event was etched into the annals of history. The stranger gave the survivor a chilling task: spread the word of what happened here, without omitting a single terrifying detail. He demanded that neither the cloaked man nor the colossal dragon be forgotten, as the gears of a grand conspiracy began to turn. Back at the cart, the group finished loading their gear while Doris officially entrusted Sheila's safety into Soma's hands. Soma promised he was up to the task, though Dina remained skeptical about putting so much faith in a total stranger. However, the girl stood by her choice, believing that if they were betrayed, it was simply a failure of her own intuition. With their final goodbyes said, The team set off as Doris waved them away from the village. Sheila watched her friend's figure fade into the distance, the cart rattling over the uneven road as their journey began. The young man inquires about the ancient ruins, but the girl warns that mastering magic is a prerequisite for entering such a place. She nods, recalling a tip from a mysterious robed madman she encountered in a Lomborn tavern. This man insisted that the true source of the demon's power was currently lying dormant within. He then revealed the location of the ruins, hidden just a short distance away. The man lacked the strength to explore them himself, so he handed the intel to any adventurer who looked capable of surviving the journey. His only price? A full report of their findings. A deal that struck the young man as incredibly suspicious. Sheila explains that she sensed an agitated presence near the entrance, and while it was just a hunch, she knew she couldn't excavate the site alone. Rena understands the logic, but wonders why they didn't recruit elite adventurers from the capital, though doing so risked drawing unwanted attention to their mission. The princess agrees that keeping a low profile is vital, and if they do walk into a trap, they'll just have to blast their way out. They soon reach their destination, a bizarre structure that looks more like a looming dungeon tower than a simple ruin. Dina is skeptical that such a massive landmark went unnoticed so close to the city, until Sheila points out a powerful concealment barrier masking it from sight and magic. The princess suggests they take a moment to gear up, considering they headed straight here the moment they hit town. Soma disagrees, arguing that a quick reconnaissance mission to gather info is more important than a full-scale preparation. Refusing to waste another second, he rallies the group and leads them toward the entrance. The party steps inside the eerie building, but the moment the last person crosses the threshold, the doors slam shut, sealing them in. Soma lets out a weary sigh. He was braced for a pit of spikes or a deadly ambush, but the interior looks surprisingly mundane. The elf nods, admitting she expected a far more lethal welcome and is relieved they aren't currently fighting for their lives. Dina, however, is unnerved by their casual attitude, baffled that they aren't immediately swarmed by monsters. But for the young man and his former rival, a few monsters would have been the least of their concerns. She draws her blade, activating a flurry of skills: katana art, forest spirit blessing, mind's eye, and finally, her devastating one-hit slash. Soma felt a flicker of concern, but the situation ultimately resolved without a hitch. Sheila had been certain those three monsters were gunning for him exactly as she'd predicted. The princess was floored that her allies could slay ghosts so easily, yet they acted like it was just another Tuesday. She knew ghosts were incorporeal entities, meaning Soma shouldn't have been able to touch them without magic. While Soma remained oblivious, the swordswoman figured their special class status was the secret to their power. Rena wasn't so sure. She held a special class herself but couldn't harm a single spirit, and Soma didn't even have a class to begin with. The revelation that the young man lacked a special class left the elf completely stunned. His companion was equally surprised that he hadn't bothered to mention this to their new acquaintance. Seizing the moment, Soma finally came clean, admitting he didn't possess a single skill, let alone a class. This left Sheila even more bewildered, remembering how he'd dominated their duel using nothing but raw swordsmanship. To her, it defied all logic. Soma was becoming a complete and utter enigma. Noticing her intense gaze, Soma asked if something was wrong, but Sheila quickly waved him off. Pushing forward, the party reached a new doorway, revealing yet another long corridor. They followed the path until they finally emerged back out onto the open street. After a bit more searching through the decaying structures, they finally found the location they were looking for. It was the final chamber of the ruins, a massive, echoing void of a room. Against the far wall stood a solitary altar, with nothing but shadows lurking behind it. The sudden appearance of a black dragon was a shock, as this altar served as a place of worship for the beast. As Soma reached out toward the creature, his friends cried out in a panicked warning. However, Soma was just disappointed by the lack of a challenge, earning him a sharp scolding from the princess for his recklessness. Soma realized the chamber was empty, while Rena asked Sheila if she had any idea what to do next. Sheila had no answers, only knowing the path led to the demon's source of power, the key to her ultimate wish. Yet something felt off. She had never shared her secret desires with anyone except Doris. Soma shared her suspicion, though in this world such mysteries were practically the norm. Sheila apologized for not pressing for more info, but Soma told her not to worry, assuming the power source would grant her magic. Despite their efforts, the room appeared empty until Soma noticed Aina investigating something in the shadows. She was examining a stone pedestal, and the hero asked if it held anything of value. She confirmed it was empty, yet the unsettling feeling in the air persisted. Suddenly, a grinding noise echoed through the room, causing Rena to scream in a panic. Soma calmed her down, realizing the object was a hidden mechanism, a theory Sheila quickly confirmed. Inside, they discovered a parchment that the elf suspected was an ancient sacred text. It was their first time seeing such a script. It looked centuries old, yet the letter itself didn't seem that aged. Sheila couldn't be certain, and Rena noted that almost no one could decipher such archaic languages anymore. However, Soma whispered to himself that this was indeed the resting place of the dormant demon power. Rena was stunned, never imagining that Soma could actually read the ancient script. The realization hit him. The rumors were true, but if this was a secret compartment, the treasure might have already been stolen. A glimmer of hope remained. If the object wasn't here, it meant it had simply been moved elsewhere. Soma realized these ruins were filled with illusions, likely designed to keep Sheila from exploring them alone. She wondered if these obstacles were even present during her previous solo attempts. Looking closer, Soma was shocked to see the ancient symbols were actually characters from his original world. He suggested that the girls head back, and surprisingly, they agreed without a second thought. The man was thrilled by the potential he discovered, even planning to task the boys with guarding the seal. However, the current situation was far from ideal and threatened to derail his master plan. Nothing was more frustrating to him, yet he endured it all for the sake of the demon lord's ultimate ambition. After their trek through the ruins, the friends gathered for a feast, though Soma was still confused about what they were actually celebrating. Dina clarified that they were toasting to a successful expedition. Even if they missed their target, they'd still walked away with a small fortune. Soma filled his mug with water while Ina opted for milk, with Rena and Sheila following suit as they toasted to their victory. Soma wasn't entirely convinced they were lucky, as the ultimate outcome remained shrouded in uncertainty. Yet the elf insisted that from an adventurer's perspective, the experience alone was worth the effort, regardless of the outcome. Little did they know that their journey back would lead them straight to a hidden treasure trove. While they weren't exactly broke before, this massive haul meant their lives were about to get a whole lot easier. The loot they scavenged from the beast exceeded their wildest dreams, potentially funding their travels for an entire year. Suddenly, a stranger called out to the party, requesting a moment of their time. A mysterious figure draped in a dark cloak approached them, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. Soma questioned the man's intentions, only for the stranger to confirm that he had a specific story he wanted to share. Rena tried to brush him off, but the man pointed toward Sheila, claiming she already knew exactly who he was and why he was there. When Soma asked if she recognized him, Sheila nodded, revealing that he was the one who originally told her about the ruins. The stranger smirked. Seeing as they were already celebrating, it was clear they had already paid the ruins a visit. Looking at their lavish feast, he assumed their expedition had been fruitful, yet the adventurers seemed strangely dissatisfied. Sheila admitted that while they found plenty of gold, the specific artifact they were searching for was nowhere to be found. The stranger bowed with a hint of annoyance, offering his condolences for the loss of such a valuable treasure. Flashing a chilling smile, he offered to guide them to other ancient ruins as compensation, ones harboring a different dormant power. Their new destination was a stark contrast to the last, featuring a massive, elongated tower stretching toward the sky. Soma tried to compliment the architecture, but Rena told him to stop lying and face reality. She was deeply concerned about the tower's safety. The elf claimed there was nothing to worry about, though her shaky voice suggested she didn't even believe herself. Dina couldn't wrap her head around it. If the tower was truly on the verge of collapse, why would anything important be stored there? As if on cue, debris rained down around them. The real danger wasn't just the crumbling walls, but the floor potentially vanishing beneath their feet. Sheila prayed the interior was in better condition than the outside, a hope that Soma desperately shared. Stepping through the threshold, the group was immediately plunged into a thick, oppressive darkness. They fumbled through the shadows, realizing the building's ancient lighting was long dead, making a proper investigation nearly impossible. Soma urged them to wait while he searched for lamps, but an impatient Dina took matters into her own hands and flooded the room with light. Soma let out a dejected groan, prompting Dina to ask if he had noticed something wrong with her magic. It was much simpler than that. He was just jealous of how easily his friends could use magic, a sentiment the elf silently shared. After testing the masonry, Soma concluded the walls were sturdy enough for now, but he strictly forbade Ina from using any high-impact offensive spells. Ina didn't need to be told twice as the comrades cautiously pushed further into the depths of the spire. Sheila's instincts kicked in instantly. Drawing on her katana mastery and mind's eye, she decapitated a skeletal guardian with a single precise strike. Without missing a beat, she followed up with a devastating double moon sword technique. Another skeleton lunged forward, but Rena intercepted it mid-air, shattering its bones before it could even reach her friend. By the time they reached the 4th floor, the skeletal ambushes were becoming relentless, and a mysterious dark mist began to swirl ahead. Soma asked the group if they were prepared for what was coming, though Dina joked that it was a little late to be asking that. Soma explained he just wanted to be certain, though he suspected she'd be the first one to lose her cool. Having traveled extensively, the princess was seasoned enough. Plus, she felt secure with Soma by her side. Rena teased her about finding safety in his shadow, and while Dina begged her not to twist her words, her blushing cheeks betrayed her true feelings. The hero gave a formal bow, acknowledging the weight of his duty, while Sheila stood firmly by her comrade. Without a word, the young man suddenly bolted toward the exit, leaving his friends behind. Blinding light flooded his vision as he emerged from the darkness, exactly as he had anticipated. Gazing through a massive hole in the ceiling, Dina realized they had finally reached the top floor. Just as Soma expected, the imposing statue of the Black Dragon stood waiting for them once again. While the princess felt relieved, she couldn't help but feel something was off. A sentiment Rena shared. Sheila noted that an ambush in such an open, vulnerable area would spell disaster for the team. Right on cue, a cascade of bones rained from the ceiling, knitting themselves together into a massive skeletal titan. Soma found the cliché trap unimpressive, but the elf noted that in ruins like these, the line between madness and brilliance is thin. A piercing scream from the princess caught the hero's attention, leaving him wondering why she was making such a scene. She was actually furious at their calm demeanor, shocked that they could stay so composed in the face of such a behemoth. However, Soma wasn't intimidated. To him, the monster was just a giant target with nothing else going for it. With a single, fluid motion, Sheila unleashed her signature one-hit slash to dismantle the beast, but the victory was short-lived. The skeleton offered no resistance because it began to instantly regenerate. She quickly realized that no matter how many times she struck, the monster would simply stitch itself back together. The warriors knew the only way to win was to pin the enemy down and prevent the healing process. Unfortunately, given the skeleton's sheer size, that strategy was going to be nearly impossible. Dina unleashed a devastating combo of shredding strikes and explosive flames to finish him off, yet the monster pressed on, lunging at the young man with a strike that narrowly missed its mark. Soma noticed the beast's patterns were becoming monotonous, and its movements increasingly predictable. Suddenly, a jagged crack began to spiderweb across the chamber wall. In that moment, Soma realized the skeleton's true intent. It was trying to bring the entire tower down. The gravity of the situation hit Soma. He knew how to win, but they were rapidly running out of time. He executed Flash, a notorious swordsman's trick, before urging his friends to quickly secure their objective. Dina frantically flipped through her notes, recalling the 7 sightings of the dragon creature in Veritas. She desperately hoped that her dark premonitions were nothing more than a product of her imagination. Deep down, she was paralyzed by the choice of whether or not to reveal the terrifying truth to him. Elsewhere, a man gazed toward the horizon with a heavy sigh, his assistant noting his visible unease. He was once again reminded of the harsh reality. This was Klaus Nemont, the legendary first king of the 7 heavens. For 3 years, they had endured a hopeless struggle, dismissing constant warnings as mere bluffs. But vigilance was now their only shield, even if the king wished these threats were just exaggerations. With a final glance, he signaled to his assistant that their business there was finally concluded. Back in the ruins, Soma examined the device, finding its mechanism identical to the ones they'd seen before. After some careful maneuvering, he dislodged a small sphere, realizing this was the prize they had been searching for. This was the vessel for the power of the demonic crown. Soma inspected the orb, finding nothing else left in the room. Unsure of its true nature, Dina suggested they head to the guild for answers, as they had no other leads. As they exited the ruins, a mysterious figure watching from the shadows immediately took notice. Checking the box, he noticed the boys had taken the ball, confirming his plan was proceeding exactly as intended. To his surprise, the adventurers were actually literate. While they might have been capable of the next step, he knew better than to expect too much from them. A sly grin crept across his face as his ultimate goal came into focus. It was time for the final push, all for the sake of his ruler and their shared ideals. When the group presented the object at the guild, the receptionist shuddered in shock while the others examined the sphere, desperately trying to figure it out. Ultimately, their efforts were in vain, though this was exactly what Soma had anticipated from the start. Dina mentioned reports of a nearby village being wiped out, but that intel only pertained to the specific ruins they had already explored. They questioned everyone they could about the sphere's purpose, yet every lead turned out to be a dead end. Realizing they were stuck, Soma concluded they needed an expert, just as a cloaked figure approached them from the shadows, catching the hero's immediate attention. The stranger smirked, realizing the group had been expecting him, even though he had planned on catching them off guard. Dina was rattled by his sudden arrival, wondering how someone could have appeared out of thin air in a place like this. The young man noted that while Lena had warned him about the area, her knowledge of the surrounding terrain was limited at best. The princess felt a wave of unease, realizing she was the only one who had failed to notice their visitor. Rena and Sheila quickly reassured her they hadn't noticed him either, though the young man still felt the princess lacked the necessary vigilance for their journey. Turning his focus back to the mysterious stranger, Soma asked if he had returned to provide them with another clue. The man was impressed by Soma's keen intuition, though he himself was a man who was notoriously difficult to rattle. Rena cut to the chase, asking if he was there to show them the proper way to utilize the mysterious sphere. This was exactly what bothered Dina. This total stranger was showing them a level of kindness that felt incredibly suspicious. Her skepticism only made him smile as he explained that his long life had granted him a surplus of wisdom he was willing to share. He asked if they would be open to his guidance, and when Sheila nodded on behalf of the team, the man looked genuinely satisfied. When pressed about the sphere's true nature, he explained that while it seemed useless on its own, it was actually a key, and that was its entire purpose for existing. Dina was stunned, while Rena immediately questioned how to use the item, assuming the answer would be simple. As Sheila recalled the ruins, the mysterious man chuckled. He planned to join them since even he wasn't sure if their prize was truly there. Without even offering his name, the man turned on his heel and silently vanished. With the stranger gone, the young man confirmed that their next objective was finally clear. The princess grew irritated by his unshakable composure, but Rena sided with him before turning her attention back to her friend. He dryly asked what she wanted, but she simply felt he hadn't been contributing enough to the conversation lately. Dina chimed in, noting that their leader had become unusually quiet as of late. Soma brushed it off, explaining that he simply had a lot on his mind. Before long, the group resumed their journey, and trekking through ancient ruins soon became their new normal. The princess let out a weary sigh. Her initial anxiety was finally replaced by relief now that they'd reached the correct destination. Between constant travel and exhaustive research, their journey had been packed with a chaotic variety of events. For Sheila, this was the first time she had ever been pushed to such a grueling and repetitive pace. The hero pointed out that these ruins felt unique, though Dina argued they were just like all the others they'd encountered. However, the scale of these new ruins was undeniably different, leaving the boys wondering how such a massive place remained hidden. The elf theorized that these locations were magically concealed. If you didn't already know they existed, you'd never find them. Rena felt a chill run down her spine, knowing she would never have stepped foot in such a place by choice. The young man suggested they proceed with caution, noting the site's isolation and the strange barrier surrounding it. He warned the group not to judge the ruins by their crumbling exterior alone, as looks could be deceiving. The girl nodded, agreeing that the interior could hold secrets far more complex than the outside suggested. Ultimately, the party knew they had to head inside. Standing around and staring wouldn't get them any closer to the truth. Soma cleared the entrance, allowing the group to finally venture deeper into the ruins. Once inside, he scanned the surroundings, but something immediately felt off, prompting Dina to ask what was wrong. It was difficult to put into words, but the heavy atmosphere was unsettling, especially since they hadn't encountered a single monster yet. When Soma pointed out the eerie silence, Rena's anxiety began to spike as she realized he was right. Sheila reasoned that since the ruins had been sealed for so long, it made sense that no monsters would be prowling the halls. The princess agreed they needed to stay vigilant, and Soma noticed that even she was finally adapting to the rigors of their journey. This realization caught her off guard, as she reflected on how much time she had spent by his side. While the others didn't see the connection, the princess looked visibly flustered and embarrassed by the observation. Rena eagerly chimed in to say she had adapted as well, beaming with joy when Soma offered her a word of praise. However, the princess grew annoyed with her companions, feeling they were being overly repetitive about staying on high alert. The elf chuckled, amused that her expectations were met, before laughing and rushing to catch up with the others. Suddenly, Soma froze mid-step, a sudden movement that caught Dina completely by surprise. Rena suspected he had discovered something important, and while she was right, he remained locked in deep thought. Dina asked if they had finally reached their goal, but Soma only offered a cryptic, vague response. Trusting him completely, Dina pledged to follow him anywhere, a sentiment the princess echoed despite her confusion. Sheila nodded in silent agreement, placing her full confidence in the young man's intuition. Taking point, Nai assumed responsibility for leading the group, warning everyone to be as prepared as possible for what lay ahead. In the distance, a strange female figure awaited them, her body swaying slowly as if she were suspended in a trance. At first, they thought she was human, but her unsettling aura and presence in such a desolate place raised immediate red flags. While Soma sensed she was something else entirely, his companions remained hesitant, unsure of who or what stood before them. In an instant, massive wings erupted from the woman's back as a celestial sword and shield materialized in her hands. The onlookers were stunned. This was no harpy, as those monsters possessed wings in place of arms. The young man was the first to recognize the truth. The woman was the spitting image of an angel. Yet, curiously, neither Dina nor Sheila had ever heard of such a divine being existing. While Soma was focused on finishing the fight, he was baffled that angels were entirely unknown to them. One by one, the girls echoed the same sentiment. They had never encountered a creature like this before. Soma realized she was a massive hurdle, a formidable adversary unlike anything they had ever faced. Without hesitation, the hero lunged forward, engaging the angelic figure in a fierce duel, but his strikes were useless, as the creature parried every blow with effortless grace. Seeing him struggle, Dina desperately asked the others if they should jump in to help. Rena flatly refused, prioritizing her own survival over a reckless intervention. The elf agreed, knowing that jumping into a fight of this caliber would only make them a liability. Suddenly, a massive shockwave erupted, sending the hero tumbling back toward his companions. Her strength was staggering, but Soma found it bizarre that a high-level entity like an angel was unheard of. In this world, the manifestation of illusions often defied human logic and imagination. Dragons, for instance, were powerful entities born from the collective concepts of the people. Since nobody knew what an angel was, they shouldn't have been able to manifest in this reality. Soma's knowledge of monsters from his previous life usually aligned perfectly with this world's bestiary. The sudden appearance of these unknown angels was a variable he hadn't accounted for. He wondered if someone was playing God, attempting to craft these celestial beings into ultimate biological weapons. Still, it was possible that similar monstrosities had roamed this world in the distant past. Sheila caught his look of confusion and asked if the enemy was proving too difficult to handle. The hero was destined to win, but at this rate the creature would only drag the battle out. The princess sensed the young man was holding back, but so was the enemy, whose ironclad defense seemed impenetrable to his current strength. The elf decided to step in, knowing they couldn't leave the entire burden on his shoulders alone. Confident she could create an opening, she chanted a spell and dissolved into the mist. Seizing the moment, the young warrior charged back into the fray. The enemy barely managed to raise a shield, narrowly blocking the elf's surprise strike from behind. After a series of rapid maneuvers, the boy found a gap and landed a heavy kick. He raised his wooden weapon for a finishing blow, but the angel suddenly parted her lips to sing. His companions cried out in terror, fearing their friend was walking right into a trap. The angel's haunting melody began, but Soma, the demon slayer, refused to falter. He slashed through her defenses before she could finish a single note of her song. However, to his absolute shock, the force of the impact caused his weapon to shatter. Sheila declared she refused to die in disgrace after such a display, leaving Dina completely bewildered. She explained that the boy had exerted so much raw power to protect them that his wooden sword simply couldn't handle the strain. The sheer intensity of the strike had essentially rewritten the rules of combat. Trembling uncontrollably, the princess stood in disbelief that she was even still alive. Rena realized that Soma had pushed himself to the absolute brink solely to keep them safe. While the princess suggested a retreat, Sheila believed this overwhelming power was the only way to defeat her. However, reality soon set in. Soma wouldn't have enough time to shield them all. Seeing the danger, the elf asked the girls if they were ready to step up and assist him. Dina was plagued by doubt, yet she refused to remain a helpless burden any longer. Rena felt the same resolve, knowing she could no longer justify her own inaction. With a sharp eye, the elf quickly analyzed the battlefield to find an opening. She unleashed her full arsenal once more, setting the stage for a devastating single-hit slash. Time stood still as the princess realized her limits. They wouldn't survive another heavy assault. Despite her nerves, Sheila tightened her grip on her katana and hurled it toward Soma. The young hero snatched the blade out of the air with perfect, split-second timing. With a legendary weapon finally in hand, the hero unleashed a lethal one-hit slash on his foe. The blow was decisive, carving the angel's massive body clean in half. Lena remarked that having the right tool for the job certainly made victory look easy. While the victory was great, Dina couldn't help but be bothered by some glaring oddities, specifically how Sheila threw that sword like a bullet, and how Soma caught it so effortlessly. Sheila explained that the speed was vital to avoid being late, and catching it was simple if you knew it was coming. Dina facepalmed, realizing she was officially the only normal person in this group of monsters. Her friends were confused, so the princess spelled it out. She thought they were all completely insane. Regardless of the logic, Soma was genuinely grateful that Sheila had stepped in to save him. He admitted he was just mimicking her movements, captivated by the sheer elegance of her technique. Flustered, the elf sheepishly asked if he was actually trying to pay her a compliment. With the battle won, Dina asks about their next move, especially since Soma's sword was shattered and he lacks a backup. However, the hero tells his comrades not to worry, claiming that exactly what he needs is already within reach. He loots the sword and shield dropped by the fallen angel, confidently declaring the gear isn't cursed and is perfectly safe to use. Dina sighs as if she's babysitting a group of fools before the party continues their journey. They soon reach a massive wall, and while it looks like a dead end, Soma suspects there's a way to force a passage open. While logic suggests a key would be hidden elsewhere, this dungeon doesn't seem to follow the usual rules. Dina suggests backtracking to find another route, but the young man immediately shuts down the idea. He's absolutely certain that their objective lies directly behind this stone barrier. If his hunch is correct, then turning back now would be a complete waste of time. Without another word, the hero delivers a devastating strike straight into the center of the wall. With a final follow-up kick, the barrier crumbles, revealing the path forward. He notes with satisfaction that the inner entrance remains completely intact, despite his brute force approach. The princess tells him to stop acting tough, finding his reckless reasoning to be incredibly flawed. Still, she's relieved they don't have to backtrack, while the Demon King's daughter warns the others not to inflate Soma's ego. Soma calmly urges them to keep moving, noting that what's done is done and there's no looking back. The team steps inside the new chamber, but at first glance they find nothing out of the ordinary. As expected, a lone dragon statue stands in the center of the otherwise empty room. Curiously, there is no altar to be found anywhere in the vicinity. Even the design of the statue itself looks remarkably different from the ones they encountered previously. Soma realizes that since they've been led here, there is only one thing left for them to do. Dina noticed something unusual. This particular specimen was far taller than the others, standing at a massive 5 meters in height. Sheila produced the sphere and prepared to insert it into the dragon, while Soma braced himself for whatever was about to happen next. She placed the orb into the empty eye socket and stepped back. But for a long moment, nothing happened. Suddenly, the heavy silence was shattered by the sound of rhythmic clapping echoing throughout the hall. A man in a cloak emerged, applauding the boys for having the strength to force their way through. It seemed they wouldn't be needing a key after all. He mockingly admitted that their arrival was a truly delightful turn of events. The man in the black robe praised how easily they had navigated the trials, expressing his gratitude for all the help they had unwittingly provided. Soma replied that he didn't see any reason for thanks, but the man told them not to be modest after such a grand performance. The man offered to answer any question as a token of his gratitude, insisting that today was a glorious day worthy of celebration. Soma didn't hold back, demanding to know what they were really looking at. The man chuckled, saying he had a right to know since it wouldn't matter much longer. He gestured to the statue, revealing it was no ordinary monument, but a sealed ancient calamity that once nearly wiped out humanity. The evil dragon, Fafnir. The sphere they carried was actually the core of the seal, meaning they had broken it with their own hands. Right then, the statue's tail began to twitch. The girl gasped, realizing this was the same dragon the elves had sacrificed countless lives to seal away generations ago. She fell into a state of shock, her breathing becoming shallow as she stared at her uncontrollably trembling hands. She screamed that it had to be a lie, but the man's laughter only grew louder, pointing out that the evidence was waking up right in front of her. Soma sighed calmly, admitting he knew nothing of this Fafnir, but he bluntly asked the man what he intended to do once the dragon was fully resurrected. The man shrugged, stating it was nothing complicated. He simply wanted the beast to cause a little trouble and plunge the world back into chaos. Soma remarked on how cliché that goal was, questioning the man on how he expected such a simple plan to actually work. Soma gripped his sword, noting that if the dragon was sealed once, it could be defeated again. But the man laughed, claiming that was now an impossibility. He explained that the dragon was sealed in 12 separate parts, and maintaining those seals required a grim price: the lives of an elf and a royal high elf, 1 life for 1 seal. 12 lives were sacrificed for this barrier, and that number hasn't changed. Since there were only 6 high elves, there's no way he can break it alone. Soma realizes the gravity of the situation. They need to stop whoever is targeting the seal before the revival. It seems everything is spiraling toward that climax, but since this is the final seal, there's no room for error. They demand to know what he hopes to gain by plunging the world into chaos. He scoffs, claiming chaos is the end goal itself. Their god craves nothing but total death and destruction. The girl's suspicions are confirmed. He truly is a heretic. While he dislikes the label, he admits it's true for now, though he claims the very definition of heresy is about to be rewritten. She mocks his arrogance, warning him not to think a single dragon's rampage will be enough to flip the world upside down. He calmly explains that this is merely the opening act. Their comrades are ready to move on his signal, and a few minor setbacks won't derail their grand design. With business out of the way, the protagonist asks one final question. Why bother explaining all of this to them? The man covers his face, erupting into a chilling laughter. He snaps his fingers, his eye turning pitch black, and declares that the answer is simple. They're all going to die here. The girls find themselves paralyzed, unable to move under the weight of the dragon's gaze. He claims he hasn't uttered a single lie since the seal broke, and now he wants to offer them a special reward. He tells them not to be modest, as their hard work deserves compensation. He demands they choose one person among them to live and keep him company, while the others perish. He frames survival as the ultimate prize in the face of certain death. Soma, however, remains unimpressed, stating that while he usually accepts what's offered, he has no use for this gift. The villain tells them not to be sad, promising their contributions will be remembered, but if they don't choose a survivor soon, the rampaging dragon will kill them all. Soma just tells his friends not to worry. Suddenly the boy strikes, slashing the dragon in a single blur of motion. The man is stunned, mockingly asking if he really thinks he can harm a beast that once made the entire world tremble. He dismisses Soma as a terrified fool, until he notices a massive, jagged gash opening across the dragon's head. The dragon lets out a final, agonizing roar before crashing lifelessly to the floor. The man stands frozen, unable to comprehend the absurdity of what he's seeing. He descends into a frantic loop of denial. This was an evil dragon, a bringer of apocalypse, and it was just killed? It's impossible. Soma asks him why he's so surprised. The dragon was merely an illusion given physical form. Once you deal enough damage to break the vessel, the life supporting it simply vanishes. It's a harsh reality to face, but a necessary price for intel. Soma tells the villain that while the situation looks grim for him, he won't have to worry about it for long, because he isn't walking away from this conversation alive. The villain sneers, claiming he's not stupid enough to reveal his true body, but he's suddenly overcome by a sharp, agonizing pain. Soma calmly mentions he actually cut him down ages ago. The man collapses, horrified that his body has been split in two despite his spatial distortions. Soma simply explains that it's quite natural. He just cuts through whatever is standing in front of him. He chuckles, admitting that he was the only true fool in this game, but now that his time is up, he's content leaving the rest to them. When asked about his next move, the protagonist explains that since they were deceived, his priority is gathering intel before finally finishing him off. After hearing the truth, the girls realize they can't just stand by. They know that as long as Soma is leading the way, they'll prevail. Soma knows the dragon won't be such an easy opponent, but despite his doubts, he remains hopeful as the girls ask for their next destination. Without a specific location, they need to investigate first, but while it's the safest path, they simply don't have the time to go back and forth. They need to act immediately, which implies the target is nearby, yet they still lack a concrete way to track it down. Soma interjects, claiming that if the recent information is true, then this very location must be linked to the enemy's whereabouts. Sensing something is off, one of the girls questions why he's gripping his sword so intensely, but Soma dismisses her fears and prepares to strike. With a powerful swing, the protagonist shatters the air itself, causing the distant dragon to realize that a portion of its power has just vanished. The beast senses an anomaly. Something unexpected has occurred, and since his subordinate hasn't returned, there's no point in waiting any longer. Driven by a strange sense of sympathy, the dragon decides to settle the score himself and takes to the skies. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Radius, Duke Neiman's men confirm that their magical research into the enemy's movements is absolute. Having mobilized the entire army, they find no signs of an ambush or enemy reinforcements, making any further hesitation seem pointless. Trusting his own judgment, the commander prepares to move out, assuring his concerned officers that he knows exactly what he's doing. He refuses to let his soldiers die in a meaningless meat grinder, and after delivering his final orders, he makes his exit. It's then that Selma's father arrives on the scene, a man feared and respected by all as the legendary Sword King. His presence alone inspires the troops, as they report that no enemy force in existence could possibly stand against his might. The Sword King agrees, noting that it's far more efficient to strike first and ask questions later than to waste time on strategy. As an aide begs him to leave at least a few survivors for questioning, the king ignores the request and leaps headfirst into the fray. Drawing his blade mid-flight, he declares that this time his strike will be the one that ends it all. Warning them to clear the area, he unleashes a supreme tier of swordsmanship, the blessing of the protector, channeling every martial art into a singular, devastating meteor strike. The impact carves a massive crater into the earth, leaving him standing tall amidst the ruins of his own power. Seeing no casualties, he offers his enemies a choice: surrender and be spared, or flee and avoid pursuit. He even promises them an honorable exit if they reveal their true motives. A defiant warrior refuses to be lectured, leaving the man with no choice but to step aside and let them fend for themselves as a massive shadow suddenly looms overhead. Stunned, he stares upward, echoing his enemy's disbelief that such a terrifying entity could even exist. A colossal dragon descends from the clouds, its presence horrifying him. The black evil dragon shouldn't be here, as its 12 seals were supposedly unbreakable. Upon closer inspection, he realizes it only resembles the legendary beast, though the reality of its presence is even more impossible to fathom. Refusing to let the creature disrupt his plans, he steadies his grip and glares directly at the dragon in the sky. He channels his power once more, stacking his buffs to unleash his ultimate deadlock skill through his blade. The strike nearly connects, but his sword suddenly shatters into pieces, leaving him completely vulnerable and in shock. Tense and weaponless, Soma desperately tries to compensate for his broken equipment, cycling through his skills to deliver a heavy physical blow. Soma quickly realizes why his blade broke. Noticing the cracks forming on his own armor, he deduces that the dragon possesses a damage reflection ability. As the dragon prepares its breath attack, Soma screams for everyone to take cover, warning them that defense is futile and evasion is their only hope for survival. A torrent of fire rains down upon them, but the soldiers are miraculously shielded by a sudden, powerful burst of defensive magic. Emerging from the smoke, Klaus appears behind him, calmly expressing his relief that the protagonist is still in one piece. Confused by the arrival of reinforcements, Soma questions why they didn't retreat, only for Klaus to explain they moved from the front lines to intercept the dragon. Klaus admits that while the mages covered their retreat, survival for many was nothing short of a miracle. A grim reality Soma quickly accepts. When asked for a damage report, Klaus admits they ran desperately to reach this position, fearing that the rest of their forces have been utterly annihilated. Soma acknowledges the gravity of the situation, declaring that their first priority must be securing medical aid for the wounded. Above all else, the hero needs a new blade. He knows he stands no chance in a battle of this scale while empty-handed. Out of nowhere, a girl appears, offering her services as a master of healing and protection. Soma is taken aback by Sophia's sudden arrival and demands to know where she came from. She arrived to deliver grim news, but the timing was irrelevant. Even with prior warning, there was little they could have done to prepare. To get here, she used a reckless method of transport that caused a localized panic upon her arrival, though she remains unfazed by the danger. As the situation intensifies, a knight approaches Klaus with an urgent report that simply cannot wait. Soma sighs, realizing there's no time for idle chatter, and asks Sophia if she's ready to assist. She gives a determined nod. Trusting her skills, Soma turns his attention to the knight, who reveals the shocking news that the Kingdom of Veritas has begun to mobilize. Soma is stunned. Marching into a zone with an active dragon is a suicide mission. Unless, of course, the dragon is exactly why they're here. As the dragon prepares another devastating breath attack, Soma realizes they're out of time. He orders Sophia to heal his leg so they can move immediately. He rallies the troops, shouting for everyone to give it their all as the massive beast takes to the sky. Standing amidst the chaos, Soma looks down at a fallen warrior, coming to terms with the fact that he was the one who ended him. He asks if the teleportation worked, and Sophia confirms that despite the rush, they made it through while remaining conscious. She explains that such a maneuver is incredibly rare, and few would even attempt it without her specific experience in ancient ruins. Turning to Lena, Soma asks if she's all right, but the girl remains eerily silent and unresponsive to his voice. It's possible she's just suffering from teleportation sickness, and after a tense moment, Lena finally snaps back to her senses. They check on her again, and while she insists she's fine, the others can tell she's acting strange. Perhaps she's just embarrassed to speak in front of Soma. Lena blames her days on seasickness, and though Soma senses she's hiding something, he decides to drop the subject for now. It seems their teleportation was a success, but the immediate question remains, where exactly have they landed? Soma decides their priority is to find an exit and scout the perimeter for any clues regarding their current location. They appear to be deep within a mountain range. Soma hopes this path leads to the altar, yet he fears the secrets it might hold. Meanwhile, Soma's father is locked in a desperate struggle against a dragon, realizing too late that they've completely underestimated the beast's overwhelming power. Our hero urges Sophia to flee to the capital and deliver the news, admitting he doesn't know how much longer he can hold the line. He offers a final apology for all the times he's failed or hurt her in the past. Sophia dismisses his regrets, claiming nothing would have changed even if he were different. She calls him completely inept one last time, but it's clear she's just putting on a brave face as she prepares to depart. She activates her escape plan, crushing a magical orb and joking that using 2 teleportation artifacts is going to wreck their family budget. She explains that while these cheap tools have a limited range, they should be enough to get her clear. However, the protagonist is surprised to realize the devices are linked in an unexpected way. Suddenly, the process stalls, leaving Sophia bewildered. The protagonist panics, knowing that once a teleportation spell begins, it should be impossible to interrupt. The dragon scoffs, mocking their naive belief that escape would be so easy. The duo is stunned to hear him speak, knowing that for an illusion, such a feat is practically a death sentence. As an entity of pure illusion, the dragon must maintain a delicate balance between authenticity and disbelief to remain in this world. By speaking, he drastically increases his presence, which paradoxically forces the world to reject him, bringing him moments away from total erasure. The dragon finds it pathetic that they're worrying about his survival while they themselves are standing on the precipice of death. He reveals that he never intended to kill them immediately, finding their struggles amusing, even if they ultimately failed to live up to his expectations. Just then, a mysterious man appears with a smirk, casually agreeing that the dragon has no intention of finishing them off just yet. The stranger insists on killing the pair with his own hands and asks the dragon to keep them pinned down. Outraged, the beast snarls, refusing to take orders from a mere human. He demands the man learn his place before drawing a massive breath, gathering the very air into his lungs for a devastating strike. As the atmosphere grows heavy with dread, the dragon declares his true identity, Fafnir, the ancient worm of horror and despair. The man is surprised by the introduction, mentioning Fafnir's history with Veritas. The dragon clarifies it was a temporary pact for his freedom, but their insults have now fueled his unstoppable wrath. Without hesitation, he unleashes a blast upon the Veritas troops, leaving them screaming in agony as they're consumed by his power. Soma's father realizes the dragon is pushing himself too far. While the fear of the soldiers makes him stronger, it also accelerates his fading existence. When asked why an illusion would risk death, Fafnir explains that he is simply fulfilling the final will of his former sovereign. Sophia realizes the truth and asks if his master was the Demon King, which the dragon confirms, honoring the ruler they dared to overthrow. After the dragon's terrifying roar, Sophia apologizes to the protagonist for her outburst, but he simply shakes it off, knowing their situation remains unchanged. For he is the Lord of death and destruction, and if he is destined to vanish from the earth after these words, then such is the dragon's indomitable will. She knows he's on the verge of tears, and while she'd never admit it to avoid his wrath, she feels she's failed as a mother, just as he feels he's failed as a father. They clasp hands as she tries to find the words, but he promises they'll finish their conversation on the other side while the dragon prepares to fulfill its master's wish for global ruin. Our protagonist claims he finally understands the situation, but his first order of business is erasing this oversized reptile from existence. The robed man thought he had victory within his grasp, only for his target to vanish into the distance, leaving everyone to wonder who this mysterious newcomer truly is. He humbly introduces himself as a passing swordsman, apologizing for the intrusion and insisting they pay him no mind. The man questions if he can truly be ignored, finding it hard to believe their meeting was a mere coincidence, though he admits their shock is entirely justified. Truthfully, they have no alternative but to trust him, and he's almost taken aback by how easily they accept his word. While the man finds it suspicious, he realizes they owe him their lives, and decides that doubting their savior would be a dishonorable way to repay the debt. But first, he must slay the beast, as the others warn him to proceed with extreme caution. Once the job is done, he'll resume his travels, but for now, he unleashes his second form, the evil slaying sword. He realizes he miscalculated by assuming this was the dragon's true physical form, meaning he needs to end this battle immediately. The boy knows he's currently no match for the beast's full power, so he's simply relieved that he'll soon be back on the road. The dragon is in disbelief that a mere human not only landed a blow, but repelled his counterattack, only for the MC to repeat that he's just a passing swordsman. He commands the others to handle the remaining army, while he takes the dragon, noting that the enemy troops seem far too terrified to actually launch an assault. Despite her protests, the man insists they leave the dragon to the professional to avoid getting in his way, before asking the boy to clear a path through the army. The boy vows to finish the dragon off before it can cause more suffering, noting that in its current battered state, the beast is hardly a threat at all. Infuriated, the dragon mocks his humanity, but his threats ring hollow given his gaping wounds. To the boy, the beast is nothing more than an insect that just grew wings. As the dragon rages, the boy coldly explains that no matter how loud he screams, he's still a bug destined to crawl in the dirt and die. The girl watches in awe of his overwhelming power, as the man realizes he never imagined anyone could take on a dragon in single combat like this. The man asks if she knew the truth, but she didn't. It wasn't something she was ever supposed to learn. She'd heard rumors of him defeating a general of the Demon King, but even then, she never imagined he was this powerful. The girl admits she's never even heard of the Demon King's generals before, and the man explains that such matters are strictly classified, never to be spoken of publicly or written in official reports. In truth, this secret is exactly what she came to discuss today, and the man acknowledges that he understands the situation completely. He suggests they move to a quieter environment to talk, as Soma's overwhelming talent has now been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. He admits that she actually surpassed him in intuition, asking how she realized it was Soma so quickly when he only figured it out by watching her reaction. She explains that her bond is stronger because she spent more time with him, even though it was less than 3 years. The man starts to disagree but stops himself, realizing it no longer matters. The girl wonders how anyone could possibly defeat a dragon, a question that Soma's father had been pondering himself. To many, humans cannot kill dragons because doing so would mean destroying a piece of the very imagination that sustains humanity. At least, that's his philosophy. But the dragon is in a state of pure shock, unable to comprehend how this human is effortlessly evading every single attack. Soma tells the beast that regardless of its denial, his victory is a reality, offering it a quick death. But the dragon refuses to surrender, unwilling to acknowledge the terrifying aura Soma radiates. As Soma's parents watch the battle unfold, the woman confesses that she's starting to have a strange realization. She suggests that everything they're seeing might just be a dream, a theory that the man finds himself agreeing with. She knows the feeling well, recalling the time Soma saved her while he was unconscious, leaving him with no memory of his own heroics. Nearby, 3 girls are huddled in conversation, drawing the attention of Soma's mother and father. The woman recognizes her daughter, Lena, who notes it's been a long time since they last saw their parents, leaving the father baffled as to how she ended up there. Lena claims she was just traveling and happened to stumble upon them, conveniently forgetting she was supposed to be home undergoing medical treatment. She tries to spin a wild tale about an ancient power awakening in their homeland, but her friends immediately call her out for the blatant lie. The man points out that she was obviously just following Soma, but warns her that she shouldn't be standing in the middle of a literal war zone. The girls admit they knew they'd be helpless on the battlefield, yet they chose to come anyway. And seeing their resolve, the man realizes he can't turn them away. The parents plead with the girls to stay close, fearing they'd never be able to look Soma in the eye if anything happened to them under their watch. Lena is hesitant, asking them to keep this secret from Soma. The man agrees, knowing that if the dragon actually targeted them, they'd be powerless to stop it. He assures her there's no need for worry. Since Soma is destined to win, the dragon won't even get the chance to move against them. The man finally sees the truth. Their unwavering faith in the boy is entirely justified as the protagonist continues his relentless assault. When Lena asks what he muttered, her father admits he has no right to say it, but he can't help feeling immense pride for Soma. The girls agree it's only natural. Just as Soma delivers a devastating blow that lops off a massive chunk of the dragon's body, the dragon reels in horror, questioning if his service to his master ends here. Soma acknowledges the beast's loyalty, but makes it clear that some sins are beyond forgiveness. Desperate, the monster tries to rally for one last stand, but Soma commands him to stay down before unleashing a final, crushing strike. With one last swift motion, the dragon's head is severed, crashing to the earth as Soma lands with effortless grace. His family and friends watch in awe as the dust settles. Even a legendary dragon couldn't stand in the way of his overwhelming power. A year passes following the Black Dragon's defeat. Lena approaches her father to discuss a private matter, finding him buried in administrative reports. He notes there's one specific issue requiring his attention, and Lena confirms it concerns Soma's future by handing him the necessary paperwork. Up until now, Soma wasn't an official member of the Newmont family, but his feat of slaying a dragon has become impossible to ignore. With witnesses from Veritas present, the royal kingdom is bound to take notice, forcing the Newmonts to solidify Soma's social standing immediately. They can't claim he appeared out of thin air, so they decide to list him as an illegitimate child, a lie that preserves Lena's position as the rightful heir. The cover story will be that they discovered his true lineage after meeting his family, effectively framing the Lord as an adulterer for the sake of the boy's status. His wife worries this will ruin his reputation, but he dismisses it, believing his tarnished honor is a small price to pay for everything Soma has endured. Though some may see through the farce, Lena confirms that Soma is already on board with the plan, proving once again that the boy is wise beyond his years. Regardless of the labels others place on them, Soma and Lena are committed to this path, refusing to waver in their shared duty. He reflects on how different things might be if those two were still around to complain, though he knows it's pointless to dwell on a lost future. Those two figures had once been the heart of the resistance, leading the charge for all those brave enough to challenge the Demon King himself. But rather than witness the nation's progress, they vanished into the shadows. Now, they've finally stepped into the light, determined to do everything in their power to help. The girl agrees, noting that regardless of who they must abandon, it's simply impossible to save everyone. The man suggests that perhaps Soma is the exception. Changing the subject, she asks if he's finally finished reviewing the reports. He's already scanned the vital documents, but the workload is immense. At this pace, it'll take months to finish everything. Back at the fortress, our protagonist notes that a full year has passed since his last visit. Despite a few detours, everything went according to plan. Suddenly, a voice asks if anyone else came to see him off. It's his father. The boy admits he expected his mother, but she still hasn't forgiven herself for the past, though he insists there's no need for her guilt. His father feels a bit awkward being the one here, explaining that since his wife was busy, he took the time to see his son off himself. When asked about the girls, the boy explains they had their own business to attend to. In fact, if his father hadn't arrived just now, he would have already departed. The man is glad they didn't miss each other, and the boy turns to face him properly. Struggling to find the right words, the father apologizes, realizing there's only one way he knows how to truly express his feelings. He challenges his son to draw his sword for one final, full-strength exchange. The protagonist agrees, unsheathing his blade as the tension rises. As a leaf drifts to the ground, the man strikes with everything he has, only for his sword to shatter against his son's defense. Channeling the blessing of the dragon god and his own refined skill, the protagonist delivers a perfect, decisive counterattack. With a proud smile, the man admits he always knew his son would surpass him, even when others accused him of being a biased parent. The hero quips that it certainly looked that way from the outside, but his father counters that today's display proved his intuition was right all along. He declares that his son will become the next Sword King, a title reserved for the undisputed strongest, and one that fits him perfectly. While the title is impossible to refuse, it doesn't carry any heavy burdens or debts. It's simply a recognition of his peerless strength. There is a reward ceremony involved, which sounds incredibly tedious to the boy, but his father notes it won't happen until he officially reaches adulthood. He is the Sword King in name now, but the delay is purely political. It's a frustrating formality, but one they simply have to accept. Our protagonist asks his father if that's everything. The man nods, apologizing for taking up his time and checking if he's forgotten anything vital. Soma assures him he's good to go. His father tells him to stay safe, and with a final smile, the young hero bids him farewell. Watching from the window, Lena realizes she's missed yet another chance to speak with him, and she knows she has no one to blame but herself. But what could she even say? He isn't a child anymore, a fact she's been forced to accept time and time again. The past is irrelevant, but she's torn. Leaving him be might be safe, but it also feels like a mistake. He doesn't realize the danger, and frankly, neither does she. Suddenly, a noise catches her attention. Someone else has arrived. It seems her time is up. She can't be in two places at once. Having already set her priorities, she prepares to move. Just then, another girl enters, questioning Rena's presence in the room. Lena is stunned to see Ina, but Ina flips the question back on her. She's found what she was looking for, and now she wants to know where Soma went. Lena warns her that Soma has already left, but Ina doesn't blink. She knows. She realizes Lena was simply standing there, watching him leave. Ina asks if she's satisfied or if she has what she needs. Lena shakes her head. She finally understands what she's been missing, and she's going to find it. Ina urges her to hurry then. Soma is gaining ground, and they can't afford to waste another second. Lena nods in firm agreement. The maiden will live, and the kingdom will endure. This world drifted off its destined course long ago, but perhaps that's exactly what it needed. Believing she can still fulfill her ultimate purpose, Lena turns and follows Ina into the unknown. A messenger informs the tyrant king that army morale has bottomed out, pleading with him to end the war. Enraged, the king snaps. His empire will never bow to traitors. While the hatred is mutual, the messenger suggests finding a new way forward. The king realizes they're backed into a corner, and they must proceed with the current plan. The king curses them all as useless, especially the demon tribe he spent a fortune to hire. The messenger defends them, arguing that they've done their part. They might have lost the battle, but they sowed chaos. Is it their fault the king's men were too overconfident to secure the actual win? The king demands to know if this boy is a demon. He's never seen him before and mocks him as a fool. The boy fires back, demanding the king reveal himself and stop playing games. The boy scoffs, saying he didn't come for a chat. The king sneers, asking if he's here to beg for forgiveness, a courtesy he didn't expect from a demon. The boy retorts that the king only has himself to blame for this disaster. How dare a failure of a ruler call anyone else a fool? The demon sneers, asking what the problem is. He's only here to tie up loose ends since the original assassin already kicked the bucket. Coldly, he informs the king that his life ends today. Suddenly, a hand pierces the demon from behind. The killer tells him not to take it personally. It was the demon's own fault for making contact. If their secret gets out, the fallout would be catastrophic, making the elimination of all evidence a necessity. As the demon fades, the killer laughs, noting that their blood is the same color after all. With the castle soon to be engulfed in chaos, the country's collapse is inevitable, unless someone steps in to stop it, as destroying the nation serves no real purpose. He reports the situation, questioning their next move. He was tasked with finding the dragon slayers, but the feat seems impossible. The dragon was supposed to be unkillable by anyone but itself. No one expected a mere mortal to pull it off. The Demon King, or rather the former hero, never imagined anyone besides those two would cause trouble. He suspects the same culprits might be responsible for Albert's death as well. He needs to track down the suspects, though they'll likely reveal themselves soon. He has his own agenda to attend to, and the last thing he wants is to deal with the Academy right now. For now, it's time to disappear. Meanwhile, in Lotrin, the capital of the Radial Kingdom, a young woman gazes out the window of the prestigious Royal Academy. This is Hildegard Lindworm, the Academy's director, who is cheerfully preparing for the start of a brand new school year. She oversees the entrance exams for prospective teachers, noting the massive influx of applicants. The surge is likely due to the ongoing unrest in the Kingdom of Veritas, which has sparked a massive wave of migration. Following the king's death, Veritas is embroiled in a succession crisis that could take 5 years to settle. Reviewing the applications, Hildegard sighs. Some candidates are getting way too creative, seemingly confusing a skill test with a creative writing essay. It's not surprising, as even having Academy applicant on a resume boosts a career. Still, she wishes people would stop using the Academy as a stepping stone. Suddenly, Hildegard spots an application that catches her off guard. When her staff asks what's wrong, she simply tells them to see for themselves. She's genuinely intrigued by what's written on the page. The applicant possesses a legendary level of swordsmanship. While impressive, there's a massive catch that makes the application highly problematic for the faculty. Hildegard tells them to look closer, specifically at the candidate's age. The staff is stunned to realize the applicant hasn't even finished elementary school yet. While the easiest path would be to ignore the application, Hildegard decides to give it a shot. They'll conduct an interview before making a final decision. After clearing through the mountain of paperwork, it's clear the new teacher candidates are elite. Even Hildegard is surprised to see a couple of world-famous adventurers among the applicants. Curious to see how things unfold, Hildegard realizes a familiar face is also applying for a position, and he should be arriving at any moment. Over in the magic department, Professor Karen Stamets stares at a document in utter disbelief, claiming it simply can't be true. Our protagonist asks what the issue is, explaining he was told this letter would handle everything. It's a recommendation signed by Klaus Neumont, Sophia, Alexis Radius, and Camila Hennefeld. Karen stammers that the letter isn't the issue. It's the sheer weight of those names. She apologizes for the delay and quickly clears him, though she wonders how he already knows exactly where to go. He was told he needed to report to the testing grounds for his faculty assignment, and as they parted, the girl wished him the best of luck. Even though they hadn't technically been admitted yet, she couldn't help but officially welcome him to the prestigious Royal Academy. Soon, Candidate 153 is called, and the girl heads to the grounds for her practical exam where she's directed toward a target despite her lingering injuries. The test begins, and while the proctor tells her she can take her time, she confidently assures him that she's ready to proceed immediately. She knows she needs to select the perfect spell to showcase her true potential, especially since the instructions on how to handle the target were so vague. Settling on her move, she chants Magic Freeze, a formidable mid-level spell, and unleashes it directly on the mark. The target is instantly encased in ice, and though she passes, the instructor notes she probably should have waited for the target to stop burning first. Since there are more candidates waiting, he conjures a new target, secretly using the opportunity to further gauge the true depth of her magical capacity. He directs her toward the next station where another instructor is waiting, leaving the girl beaming with joy over her success. It's finally our protagonist's turn, and the instructor notes his timely arrival even though the testing area is now mostly deserted. As he steps up, the girl watches in awe. In this world, black hair is the hallmark of a genius, reserved only for the most talented elites. When the protagonist asks for his objective, the instructor simply tells him to use the target to show off something truly surprising. As our hero weighs his options, the girl wonders if he'll rely on a rare sword technique or some form of high-level magic. Without hesitation, he strikes with a devastating magic blade, releasing a shockwave so powerful it nearly knocks the girl off her feet. When the dust settles, the training ground is a total void, leaving the instructor horrified since that target was built to withstand his own full power. Having breezed through the exam, he finds himself with hours to kill before the afternoon ceremony, so he decides to head out and explore the city. He wanders the streets in the early morning light, finding the city quiet, but still preferring a walk over sitting around and doing nothing. While he searches for something interesting, the scene shifts to a girl forced to use mid-level skills like danger detection and parrying to defend herself. She briefly wonders if her counterattack was too brutal, but quickly dismisses the thought since they were the ones who ambushed her. She demands to know why these three robed figures attacked her, though she quickly realizes these silent assassins aren't going to give her any answers. They lunge at her, but she evades with a triple jump before retaliating with a lethal double-fang sword strike. Suddenly, a mysterious melody rings out, attempting to charm the girl, but she resists the hypnotic song and counters with a martial arts skill. One assailant drops from above for a killing blow, only for the girl to expertly parry the stranger's strike. Realizing a magician is about to incinerate everyone, including his own ally, Soma steps in, complaining that things have gotten far too noisy. Though hesitant to interfere, Soma decides it'd be a shame to let anyone get hurt, standing casually over the defeated foes. Later, at the Royal Guard headquarters, our protagonist enjoys some tea, pleasantly surprised by the unexpected hospitality. He hopes they don't view him as an accomplice, as he tried to avoid suspicion even though the name Newmont is already on everyone's lips. After a report on the skirmish, Soma questions why the king of the Radial Kingdom, Alexis Radius, is personally present. Alexis finds it only natural to thank his daughter's savior, a gesture Soma finds entirely predictable. The king remarks on Soma's resemblance to his parents, noting that the boy didn't even bother to bow upon his arrival. Soma cuts to the chase, asking if the attackers were identified, but the king admits they vanished without a trace, begging Soma to watch over his daughter at the academy. Soma can't promise much since they aren't close, but agrees to protect her while she's in his sight, earning him the title Future King of Swordsmen. Soma reflects on the king's shrewd nature and his connection to his father before turning his attention back to the princess. The girl apologizes for making him late, but Soma brushes it off, claiming he was just wandering the city and doing nothing anyway. He admits he was so excited for his first day at the academy that he woke up early, a feeling the girl seems to share. He tells her there's no need for apologies and suggests she relax and clear her mind of any lingering worries. With only the entrance ceremony today, he tells her to stay calm, though she admits she's shocked she even passed the exam. Soma worries he showed too much power during the test, emphasizing that control is more important than raw strength, leaving the girl in awe of his wisdom. She mentions her father, and Soma asks if she was trying to hide her royal status, a secret that won't last long once classes begin. She confesses she just wants to be treated like a normal person, prompting Soma to ask if she's really ready to give up the royal treatment. Relieved, she finds she can speak to him with ease. Soma makes it clear he doesn't care about her lineage. If he did, he wouldn't be so casual with her. Sylvia quickly dismisses any concerns, and when she asks if he's also enrolling in the magic department, he confirms his plans. Formally introducing herself, she reveals her name is Sylvia, and expresses her genuine pleasure in meeting him. As a massive crowd gathers at the prestigious Royal Academy, the two of them make their way toward the entrance. Soma assumes the ceremony will be in a grand hall, but Sylvia corrects him, noting they've been directed straight to the training grounds instead. Soma wonders if they're in the wrong place, but Sylvia explains that at this academy, the training ground is more of a combat arena. Amidst their confusion, Sylvia remarks on the surprisingly high number of students who managed to pass the initial intake this year. Soma points out a few shady characters in the crowd, specifically 3 figures in heavy robes, though they've clearly been admitted as students. Suddenly, the doors burst open as a woman wielding a firearm steps out, welcoming the confused freshmen to the academy. She claims a traditional ceremony would be far too dull for a place where geniuses reach for the impossible, and she intends to prove it. Demanding they prove their worth, the students begin to whisper as they recognize her distinct features and commanding presence. She's the kingdom's greatest hero, the Silver Battle Princess, though she finds the title embarrassing and warns them that flattery won't earn them points. This is Camila Hennefeld, a legendary figure alongside heroes like Beatrice de Monte, the otherworldly Yuri Kanzaki, and the duo known as the King and Queen of Heaven. A savior to many, she's famous for defeating powerful skill users despite having no special abilities of her own, a living legend parents tell their children about. Realizing they'll have to face her, the crowd tenses up. Camila notes that since they already know her name, they can skip the introductions and get right to business. First, she clarifies this won't be a series of duels. They must work together to show her the full extent of their combined potential. Secondly, she produces a familiar item, a replica of the infamous collars used to nullify a person's magical skills. While it's less potent than the original, it's enough to significantly weaken her powers as she fastens it around her own neck. Even nerfed, she warns that she's still more than capable of crushing them, adding that they shouldn't take it personally if they end up expelled today. She challenges them not to lose hope. Even when faced with impossible odds, they must find their inner strength and, at the very least, try to enjoy the fight. Urging them to take her advice to heart, she leaps into the fray. The students whisper among themselves, confident that despite her status as the kingdom's heroine, her weakened skills and their superior numbers give them a fighting chance. Upon landing, she unleashes a dragon's summoning, creating a massive shockwave that levels the surroundings. Stunned, the students wonder if her supposed weakness was just a cruel joke. She notes their confusion regarding her power-dampening collar. While she's restricted to low-level skills, she poses a philosophical question. Does the skill define the power, or does the user? Even a basic technique becomes lethal in the hands of a master. To her, skills are merely tools for combat. She promises to show them their true potential before launching her next assault. She commends a student for standing his ground while others fled. His average fencing, combined with her collar-restricted output, means he actually has a chance to parry her strikes. Knowing a simple jab won't suffice, she escalates the pressure with a devastating roaring swing. The student barely holds on, baffled that this is considered a low-level attack. He tries to exploit the cover of the smoke, hoping to land a blow she can't see coming. He activates mind's eye fencing to strike through the haze, but his blade is met by the cold steel of her axe. She admits she couldn't have parried that particular move, so she simply repositioned to close the gap. The student stares up in disbelief, questioning if such a feat is even humanly possible. Descending with an aerial strike, she acknowledges his talent but notes that time is running out. To finish the lesson on schedule, she'll have to get a little more serious. Besides, her true rival is waiting in the wings. She turns her gaze toward Soma, asking if he's finally ready to begin. It's 6 a.m. at the Newmont estate, and as usual, Soma has been honing his skills since the crack of dawn. Aina greets Risa, who can't help but notice Soma's relentless drive and boundless energy. His father comments on his vigor, but Soma humbly brushes it off, claiming he just had some extra time since he rarely goes out. When asked if he's been training this whole time, Soma gives a simple yes. Aina recalls an old fairy tale about a monster capable of devouring an entire forest, realizing now that the legend might be a very real description of Soma's power. Months have passed since they arrived at the Newmont villa, and Aina is constantly reminded of Soma's absurdity, like the time he literally sliced the earth open just to create a hot spring. He once struck the very sky just to scatter the clouds. With strength that defies logic, she wonders if he even needs magic at all, though now seems like the perfect opportunity for him to learn. Soma wishes he could clear the overcast sky to see the stars for tonight's renovation party. Realizing he only has a standard sword, the girl offers to reveal the constellations for him. Without the need for any world-shattering sword techniques, a swarm of glowing butterflies erupts around her as she manifests the starry view. She's more than capable, but finds his casual request for simple feats a bit insulting given his own monstrous power. Back in the present, she tosses students across the arena like rag dolls, jokingly telling Soma how well they fly. Meanwhile, a group of students waits in line, desperate for a chance to prove themselves against her one-on-one. At this rate, the sheer number of duels will eventually exhaust her, a fact her opponent is counting on. But after a heavy exchange, it's the girl's axe that finally shatters. The swordsman believes he has her cornered, but she stuns him by effortlessly parrying his follow-up with a sword of her own. Although she only possesses advanced-level skills, her mastery of a universal martial arts style allows her to compete with those wielding special abilities. Sylvia assumed everyone was aware of this, leaving her opponent completely bewildered. Camila admits she didn't expect her weapon to break so soon, but now she's ready to get serious. Her ability to utilize any weapon and its corresponding skills makes this chaotic battlefield, littered with discarded arms, her ultimate playground. After tossing the other students aside, the protagonist steps forward and asks if he can finally be her next opponent. She chides him for being late to the party, while he reminds her that she was the one who refused his previous request for a rematch. She explains that the circumstances have changed now that she's his instructor. He looks forward to his revenge, but she vows to win, starting with the removal of her restrictive collar. She shatters the device and asks if anyone has an objection, though Soma would have been more annoyed if she had kept it on. Camila smirked, expecting nothing less. She signals the start of the duel and immediately invokes the power of the gods. She unleashes a furious explosion before leaping back to a distance, waiting to see the results of her blast. However, the protagonist stands completely unscathed. She admits she hoped to crush him into the dirt, but seeing his unwavering composure only makes her smile. The MC teases her for her feigned surprise, but she simply brushes it off, asking why he's pointing out the obvious. Soma suggests a technique involving juggling weapons mid-air to chain attacks, but she dismisses it as a common trick compared to his truly remarkable abilities. With time running out, he asks the teacher how many more weapons she plans to break. She calls him a poor warrior for discarding his equipment, a point Soma doesn't bother to argue. Camila then launches a multi-layered assault, combining advanced axe techniques, fencing, and martial arts into one massive full-swing strike. Her blade snaps from the intensity, but she instantly snatches up a mace, transitioning into advanced mace and bow mastery without losing momentum. The protagonist counters by activating the power of the gods and his mind's eye, letting out a battle cry as he delivers a massive slash to block her blow. Clearly frustrated that her plan failed, she admits that his unorthodox use of broken axe handles and bows as makeshift clubs actually had her rattled. Challenging him to see what he has left, she raises her fists and asks if he's ready for a real brawl. The girl unleashes a flurry of martial arts and divine power, channeling her mind's eye into a devastating explosive fist. However, the protagonist strikes first, leaving her stunned as she realizes this is yet another defeat. As Soma stands unfazed with his blade drawn, she wonders how he can be this powerful. Could he possess a hidden special skill? But she quickly dismisses the thought. Only 2 people in the world possess that power, making it an absolute impossibility. While she ponders if another instructor should intervene, Soma simply stands his ground, waiting for the next move. Suddenly, a mysterious figure lunges from the shadows, launching a lethal surprise attack at Soma's back. The stranger's blade stops inches from his neck as Soma turns, immediately seeing through Sheila's disguise. Shedding her robe, she admits it was worth a shot, though Soma questions if revealing her identity so easily is wise. She argues that wearing a cloak in the academy is disrespectful, while Soma wonders how she avoided a reprimand until now. Sheila claims she has a permit but demands to know how he countered her so easily. He bluntly notes she's wearing the same cloak as before. Annoyed by his simple answer, she listens as he explains that her attack was far too telegraphed to catch him off guard. He suggests a better disguise might have worked, unlike Lena, who gasps in shock that she's already been compromised. He points out that her over-the-top acting made her even easier to spot. Lena removes her hood, sighing that he hasn't changed a bit. They've been planning this since the entrance ceremony, prompting Soma to ask if he'd done something to deserve such hostility. The girls insist they just want to taste victory over him once, treating this as their rare chance to finally win. Soma readies his sword as Lena begins to chant, summoning the everlasting flame to obey her command. Realizing she's casting a high-level spell, Soma wonders if failing to parry this blow might actually be his end. He recognizes his mother's signature magic, a flame that won't stop until everything is ash, while the girls trust he's strong enough to survive. With a sharp gesture, she commands the endless kahina to incinerate everything, unleashing a massive pillar of fire. As the inferno rages, Lena begins to fear she went too far, while the others worry about the collateral damage to the surroundings. She insists she can control her target and pleads for their trust, noting that as long as the flame burns, Soma is alive. Her friend, however, is furious, questioning her loyalty and wondering how the hell Soma is still breathing. Peering through the fire, she's irritated to see our protagonist standing there, completely unfazed. He's perfectly fine, remarking that with magic like that, she definitely can't call herself ordinary anymore. When they ask how he countered the spell, he casually explains that he just kept swinging his sword to disperse the flames until her mana ran dry. They label him a complete lunatic, but when he asks if they want another round, all 3 girls eagerly accept. Soma immediately shuts them down with an internal slash, wiping the floor with the trio before asking if there are any more challengers. As he approaches the girl, she cowers in fear, wondering if she'll ever reach his level, while Soma realizes the confrontation is finally over. The instructor asks the students if they enjoyed their initiation ceremony before officially welcoming them to the academy. A tour of the faculty was supposed to be next, but it seems everyone is far too exhausted to move. She dismisses them to their rooms to rest, promising to send out schedules later, much to our protagonist's relief. A few days later, The grind of academic life begins with a flurry of basic education courses and standard lectures. Along with martial arts, Soma finds himself most interested in the magic theory lessons. However, after a few days, he realizes the curriculum is far too basic for him, having yet to learn a single new thing. He retreats to the massive Royal Academy library, grinning as he realizes the sheer number of books at his disposal. Since students of any year have full access to the archives, he dives in, but soon notices a girl watching him. She reflects on her royal lineage, knowing she won't take the throne but still desperate to prove her worth to the kingdom. Realizing the kingdom's magic is outdated, she aims to use her talent to bridge the gap, only to discover a world full of monsters. Like Soma, she's completely enamored by his brilliance, noting that he handles every complex question with ease. He even dominated the fencing instructor without breaking a sweat, confirming her suspicions that he's in a league of his own. But her admiration turns to a pout. Seeing him buried in books makes her want to prove that she's just as capable at the blackboard. 2 weeks into the semester, the protagonist is already feeling the pressure, buried under books, but unsure if any of this knowledge will actually help him reach his goals. He shifts his focus to the labyrinth, a mystical place where monsters respawn in the blink of an eye, and legendary treasures await those brave enough to enter. The existence of this labyrinth was the primary reason he enrolled in the academy, which was built directly on top of it and even offers courses dedicated to its secrets. Unfortunately, official access is restricted until he completes his secondary education, leaving him desperate to find a loophole that will let him inside sooner. While chatting with the girls, he discovers they aren't just browsing the library. They're hunting for a grimoire, a legendary tome of magical knowledge. These rare spellbooks allow a user to master specific magic instantly, but they're incredibly expensive, usually found only in labyrinths, and possess limited uses. Since neither he nor Sheila has any formal training, she's desperately searching for a basic grimoire to finally get a handle on the fundamentals of magic. She's prepared to take her time, especially since grimoires are so rare that most people never even get the chance to see one, let alone read it. However, the text is written in ancient symbols that are nearly impossible for the average person to decipher, making the book seemingly useless to her. When she asks him to take a look, he effortlessly begins to read the text, leaving her absolutely stunned by his linguistic abilities. He translates a mundane entry from over a century ago, a simple diary log about an ordinary day and a centennial celebration that didn't live up to the hype. The intricate, forge-proof designs on the covers confirm their authenticity, and the protagonist realizes these books are exactly what they claim to be. As he flips through several more volumes, he finds he can read every single one of them, questioning why everyone is so shocked by such a common-sense skill. The girl explains that these eerie symbols are believed to be a script from another world, a gift from God brought by otherworlders who introduced lost technologies. He wonders if she's similar to Iori Kenzaki, and when he asks about her knowledge of the labyrinth, she cryptically hints that she knows more than she lets on. Seizing the opportunity, he asks if there's a secret way to enter the labyrinth immediately, hoping she might be willing to teach him the ropes. While standard rules forbid elementary students from entering, she mentions a little-known exception to the academy's strict formalities. It turns out that by petitioning an instructor, one can take a special exam, and the person overseeing this test is none other than the academy director herself. The next morning, the protagonist finds himself standing before an ancient structure, unsure if he's looking at a sacred temple or forgotten ruins. As they prepare, he wonders if the director is simply bored, but he's quickly reminded to show respect, as she remains the undisputed strongest person in the academy. Soma admits that under any other teacher, he wouldn't have made it this far, but when she starts gloating, he tells her not to let it go to her head. Suddenly, a barrier flickers into existence, which Soma explains is a safety measure to contain any monsters, even though an escape is highly unlikely. With no time to waste, she reveals the exam's secret. She's warping him directly to the 10th floor to begin the real test. Level 10 is the intermediate stage for those who've mastered the basics, and with 2 hours on the clock, Soma begins his descent. A group of goblins lies in wait, but as one lunges from the shadows, Soma effortlessly takes its head in a single motion. Continuing down the stairs, our protagonist carves a path through every enemy that dares to cross his path. Feeling confident about his pace, he casually asks the girl why she speaks so strangely, which immediately strikes a nerve. He clarifies that he wasn't trying to be rude, but it's bizarre seeing a grown woman acting like a literal child. Surprised, she asks when he figured it out, and he reveals that he knew she was the dragon from the very moment they met. She nervously asks if he plans to slay her, but Soma reassures her that he despises unnecessary killing, even if he were ordered to do so. She admits she wanted to surprise him, finally revealing why she took such a personal interest in overseeing his exam. It turns out she's not even 50 years old yet, and while her dragon form is massive, she prefers a more compact human vessel. She chose this petite, cute girl appearance purely by choice, though Soma decides it's best to just ignore her vanity. Things take a weird turn when she mentions wanting to have his child, claiming that because he defeated her, he's now the only one for her. Soma is baffled by her nonsense, realizing her entire plan involved reviving him specifically for this bizarre purpose. He questions if a non-human can even conceive, but she explains that her current form is a physical body, not just a magical illusion. Since she has another 5 centuries of growth ahead of her, she asks if she has finally fulfilled his deepest wish. However, there's a catch. He still can't use magic, so she asks for permission to examine his status to see what's going on. Soma grants her access, and she is immediately floored by the staggering, endless list of abilities he possesses. Among his various talents, she spots high-tier magical skills that prove his potential is absolutely undeniable. He is strictly forbidden from further developing his magical or physical prowess, and she finally realizes the gravity of the situation. The reality sinks in. He might never master magic. When he asks if this restriction will truly hinder him, he reflects on the goblins he's already slain. He questions where she went wrong during his reincarnation. It turns out her divine ability interfered with his new vessel, effectively crippling his growth and leaving her devastated. However, he remains unfazed. Understanding the root cause of his magical seal is actually a massive leap forward in his eyes. He reassures her that she's done enough by giving him a second life. When she suddenly asks to have his child, he gives her a blunt and immediate rejection. Soon after, the duo reaches the 10th floor of the labyrinth. He notes how effortless the climb was and asks how long the trek actually took. She reveals it only took an hour, half the expected time, confirming he passed his exam with flying colors. He contemplates whether his magical seal was an unintended side effect of his rebirth, but concludes that complaining about his lot in life is a waste of time. Still, he can't help but feel a sting of resentment, knowing he'd be a magical prodigy if not for this specific prohibition skill holding him back. Pushing those intrusive thoughts aside, he decides to focus entirely on the challenges right in front of him. He embraces the difficult path ahead, comparing his struggle to the grueling journey of a master swordsman and bracing himself for the monumental effort required. At the magic testing grounds, a voice calls out to Soma. She turns in surprise, questioning what this unexpected visitor is doing there. The man claims he's seeking inspiration rather than practice. After hearing they're just training, he shifts his arrogant gaze toward Soma's companion. Sensing the stranger's hostility, the MC politely asks for his name, which only enrages the man further. Soma whispers that their friend seems to be in a foul mood today. Fuming, the man asks if he's being mocked, looking to Soma for validation. Meanwhile, our protagonist is left standing there, completely out of the loop. Soma explains that this is Lars Hoffman, the supposed star and heir of his house. He was incredibly cocky during a ceremony until the MC humbled him and left his pride in tatters. The MC nods but admits he's never even heard of the Hoffman family. This leaves Soma questioning if he's actually from this kingdom at all. Switching gears, she tentatively asks him a much more personal question. Does he have a girlfriend? He immediately grows concerned, asking if she's being threatened or coerced. Soma is internally annoyed by his denseness, insisting she's fine and that Aina is a true friend. He admits Aina is nice but warns her that she can be a nightmare to deal with. Suddenly, an angry voice interrupts, reminding them that Lars is still standing right there. The boy hesitated, judging the girl as weak, though he knew Aina, who was stronger than any mage, must have sensed some hidden potential within her. Noticing the massive crowd, the girl explained it was only natural since it was the first day of the labyrinth exploration, though the young man still wished for a bit more breathing room. As groups began to form, she worried they wouldn't finish their tasks by sundown, noting that the first-come, first-served rule had everyone in a desperate rush to start. She reminded him that their preparation speed would dictate when they could enter the labyrinth, stressing that moving fast was the only way to get an early start. When she asked if they needed to hunt for the rest of the team, The boy assured her they just had to wait for the right moment to make their move. He pointed out that they needed a four-man cell and were still missing one person, but just as he wondered where she was, the girl announced her arrival. Another girl chimed in, happy to be the fifth member, but the guy immediately ordered her back to her post, prompting her to demand a reason for his hostility. He reminded her that she was supposed to be teaching, a fact she sadly conceded before suddenly remembering she actually had other duties to attend to. She approached him, curious if he was recruiting these specific people, and he explained that working with familiar faces was simply more efficient. However, she informed him that he wasn't allowed to group up with his friend Ina, leaving him confused since there were supposedly no restrictions on party formation. Camila explained that pairing with Ina wouldn't provide any real training, right before another girl expressed shock at seeing the teacher there in person. It was then revealed that Soma and Sheila were banned from teaming up with the Vanguard, while Ina was prohibited from joining any rearguard members. Camila clarified that grouping with the same role would stifle their growth, preventing them from ever reaching their true potential. The young man begrudgingly accepted the terms but tried to argue that his role was technically a mage, a claim Camila met with immediate skepticism. With the clock ticking, the girls scrambled to find Vanguard and rearguard members to fill their ranks, while the guy began his own search for available teammates. When his sister wondered why he was struggling to find a team, Camila pointed out that while the others were famous, he was still a total unknown. She hung her head in disappointment, but he urged her to keep searching before turning to a confused Helen to ask if she had found a group yet. Realizing her hesitation, he admitted he thought she wanted to team up with him, but the girl was terrified she'd only end up being a burden. He laughed off her concerns, noting that he was the one everyone was avoiding, and gladly welcomed her to the team once she finally gave her consent. Reaching out his hand, he officially invited her to join his group, asking for her help as they prepared to head into the unknown together. After shaking hands, the MC expresses his trust, but the girl hesitates, warning him that a mysterious figure is watching his every move. Unfazed, the MC admits he noticed the surveillance and demands the stranger reveal his identity immediately. The newcomer introduces himself as the star Lars Hoffman, expecting recognition, but the MC simply shrugs and offers him a spot in their party instead. Lars acts like he has better offers before begrudgingly agreeing to join, claiming he has no other choice but to assist them. With one spot left, the MC notes that most students have already paired up, but Lars points out a lone girl standing nearby. Following Lars's gaze, the MC sees a girl standing in isolation, and the group decides she's the perfect final addition to their ranks. Confident that they need to round out their numbers, the MC smiles and decides to take the lead in approaching her. He checks in with Helen to ensure she's comfortable with the choice, then heads over to extend the invitation himself. When he asks her to join, the girl is visibly stunned, staring back at him in complete and utter bewilderment. He gives her an easy out, but to his surprise, she quickly agrees, eager to finally be part of a team. Now a full squad, the girl joins the ranks, though she wonders if just 4 of them can truly conquer the maze despite the MC's strength. The MC lays out a rational plan. They'll test the waters together, and if things get too dangerous, they'll retreat and recruit more members. They report to their instructor, who turns her attention to the group, curious if they've run into any early complications. When they announce their intent to enter the maze first, the teacher is surprised, noting that this year's class is being unusually hesitant. Lars scoffs at the caution of his peers, calling them cowards, a sentiment the teacher admits might actually hold some weight. She emphasizes that while planning is good, true growth comes from facing the unknown threats lurking within the labyrinth. With the lecture over, the group prepares to descend as the teacher calls upon Kurt to serve as their official guide. A third-year student named Kurt steps forward, introducing himself as the mentor for their upcoming expedition. Kurt reiterates his role as their senior guide, expressing his excitement to lead such a motivated group of underclassmen. The group returns the greeting, though the girls can't help but notice that their senior guide looks surprisingly young for his age. Kurt offered nothing but a silent smile as another teammate announced it was time to move out. He declared he would perform a rough feat of clairvoyance, immediately drawing his blade and swinging it with violent precision. Even with the monster's hand around his throat, the boy noted how weak it felt, but his focus shifted when he saw a familiar face, shouting Sylvia's name in shock. The young man and his squad weren't about to play spectators. He lunged forward and decapitated the beast in a single stroke. Lars offered his thanks, and while they assured him they'd always be there to back him up, He couldn't help but marvel at their elite swordsmanship, wondering why they'd even bother with magic. Staring at the boy, Lars pondered why their fates had intertwined before declaring he would take point on the next monster, charging toward his target. As the boy engaged the beast, Sylvia stood close behind, her eyes fixed on his every move. She realized her intervention wasn't needed, impressed by how he commanded the rear guard with such poise. It was clear his previous labyrinth runs had made him a seasoned veteran. She watched the others, noting they seemed oblivious to his true depth of experience, and she began to wonder just how powerful he actually was. With the enemies cleared, he suggested they push forward, though he admitted the pace was starting to wear on him, a sentiment Lars echoed after an hour of non-stop combat. Sylvia checked in on the other girl, who confessed her fatigue but insisted on pressing on. Their leader agreed, though he warned them to know their limits. The party navigated deeper into the labyrinth, confident that their instincts had led them down the correct path. Spotting a lone monster ahead, Lars claimed the kill for himself, eager to prove his worth. After the creature fell, the boy apologized for the accident, claiming he just wanted to finish quickly. Lars didn't care for excuses, demanding the next target as the boy warned him to stay sharp. Sylvia analyzed the situation, identifying the creature as a high goblin, not a major threat on its own, but a species that had no business appearing on the first floor. Lars questioned if the boy's interference was truly an accident. He'd expected this raid to be a bore, but now he realized things were about to get interesting. When the weekend rolled around, the girl could usually be found buried in her soft pillows, letting out long, dramatic sighs. A blonde girl walked in, exasperated to find her friend still moping, questioning if she had even bothered to open her eyes all day. She lectured her on whether such laziness befitted a lady of her status, receiving only a muffled, non-committal groan in response. Determined to get to the bottom of the mood, she grabbed a nearby book, only to realize it was a rare novel where her friend was the protagonist. Panic set in as the girl lunged to snatch it back. With a playful grin, she admits everything looks adorable but insists on being completely transparent. Her companion scoffs, telling her she's letting her incredible talents go to waste. From the bed, the girl sighs that her friend used to be much kinder. The blonde acts shocked, flashing her dress to prove she's still the same old girl, but her friend reminds her that she's always been this way. She asks Maria why she's here, and Maria simply replies she's just there to perform her duties and make the bed. But it's not just about work. Maria noticed she seemed down and wanted to cheer her up, asking if something happened back at the academy. Clutching her dress, the girl admits Maria is right. She begs her to listen, and Maria immediately leans in, concerned about what's bothering her. Maria warns her to be careful, bluntly admitting a total lack of talent in public is a recipe for disaster. She even jokes that hearing such self-deprecation makes her want to punish her. She explains that while having a solid foundation of intermediate skills is good, it's even better when your favorite specialties reach that same level. She worries that she can't keep up with the academy elites who have already mastered advanced skills, noting that even specialized pros with lower averages are still far stronger than her. Maria reassures her that she's selling herself short and is actually much stronger than she realizes. The girl thanks her, starting to believe that Maria might be right. Feeling a bit ignored, Maria asks if her advice is even sinking in before finally letting her friend do as she pleases. The girl agrees, grateful for the guidance. Walking to the window, she mentions she's only allowed home once every 2 weeks. It's a royal privilege, but she knows she shouldn't just rely on her status. She needs to truly change. Maria encourages her to give it her all, and the girl responds with a genuine, thankful smile. The girl tells the guy he's been teaching her quite a lot. Puzzled, he asks for clarification, wondering if she's trying to present him with a fait accompli. She bluntly admits her motivation is revenge, leaving the boy trembling in shock. Behind him, his companion sighs, asking if he's gone and messed up again. When asked if she wants to get to know Sylvia, she explains she just wants to be helpful. First, she needs to master the maze, and then she wants his honest take on their recent lesson. The young man beckons her over to highlight some crucial details, stressing the importance of staying vigilant and always preparing for the worst-case scenario. She agrees, reminding everyone that they were warned about this before the lesson started. They must be ready for danger to strike at any moment. She nods, acknowledging he's likely right. The boy admits that since he's only been in the labyrinth once, he's not entirely sure he can accurately judge the true scale of the danger. Another girl asks if it's even possible to feel the danger like he does. When he asks for clarification, she desperately gives up, saying it's too hard to explain. She agrees, confident her brother can handle any challenge, but she doubts they'll ever sense the labyrinth themselves. Another girl then asks if the only way to truly learn is to venture out without Soma's help. He refutes her claims, assuring her that he isn't a god who can do everything at once, adding that in the real world, things rarely go according to plan. Another girl sides with Sylvia, noting that unexpected disasters are the norm, prompting the boy to nod in agreement while she watches him curiously. He emphasizes that these variables are impossible to predict, explaining that in unexplored territory, reality is often harsher than any worst-case scenario they could imagine. Skeptical, she asks if he's implying that trying to predict the worst-case scenario is ultimately a waste of time. He clarifies that preparation is still vital. You must assume the worst, but stay flexible enough to handle the truly unthinkable when it inevitably happens. Sylvia smiles and thanks him for the lesson, though he humbly admits he isn't sure how much his rambling actually helped her. He notes that finding the optimal path requires weighing every possibility, and luckily, the three of them have the special skills to pull it off, making the girls realize he's a natural teacher. They encourage Sylvia to reach out if she ever needs more guidance, and she graciously accepts, eager to soak up as much knowledge as possible. One of the girls begins a live demonstration, swirling a ball of energy on her fingertip, while her companion showcases some advanced combat techniques. By their second lesson in the labyrinth, the boy notes that the training is clearly paying off, while Evia credits Sylvia's rapid growth to her own tireless efforts. However, Lars bluntly argues that these skills should be second nature to her, leaving Sylvia feeling disappointed as she offers a quiet apology. When he asks why she's apologizing, she explains that she feels guilty for the moment he had to save her because she couldn't protect herself. Lars lets out an annoyed hiss, telling Sylvia flat out that her mindset is wrong, leaving her blinking in total confusion. Evia steps in to explain that Lars simply doesn't want her to feel indebted. Realizing how odd it is to apologize for being helped, Sylvia switches to a sincere thank you. Lars brushes it off, muttering that she didn't even need to say that much, as gratitude isn't a requirement among comrades. He then barks at the team to shut up and focus, reminding them they haven't cleared the labyrinth yet, a sentiment the other boy quickly echoes. Thanks to their rigorous training, the group reaches the second floor well ahead of schedule, but they decide to stay and sharpen their skills rather than rushing deeper. It's a smart move, as the monsters on the third floor are a massive step up in lethality, claiming the lives of countless rookies who rush in unprepared. He warns that overconfidence on the upper floors leads to a swift death, admitting he's glad to be part of such a cautious and capable group as the challenge intensifies. Meanwhile, Soma finally steps into the labyrinth's boss room, ready for the real fight to begin. Soma spearheaded the advance while the girl watched in terror, prompting the boy to ask if she was holding up okay. She explained that their only goal was to reach the end of the dungeon, but the boy was more interested in whether any legendary treasure was waiting for them. She shut that idea down immediately, clarifying that it wasn't gold they were after, but fragments of a malevolent deity's power sealed within the dungeon's deepest reaches. Terrified, the young man asked if her goal was world domination, and insisted he needed to alert his father and King Alexis. The girl scoffed at the notion, demanding to know how he'd reached such a wild conclusion. The boy argued that discovering a fragment of an evil god was bad news regardless of the intent, but the girl just laughed, claiming he completely misunderstood the situation. She explained that the energy leaking from the fragment was mutating the local monsters. By culling these creatures, the excess power would dissipate and the seal would be preserved. She warned that the deeper they ventured, the more horrific the mutations became, which is why only half of the dungeon's 100 floors have ever been explored. The boy worried his own power was too destructive, but she confirmed that without monsters to absorb the leaking energy, it would overflow into the upper floors and spawn dangerous creatures in the shallows. The girl nodded, noting he was lucky to arrive just as the dungeon's stability was failing. When he asked if he simply needed to dive deep and kill the monsters, she gave a curt, affirmative reply. She was genuinely stunned by their progress, noting that nothing like this had ever happened before. Their rapid pace was unprecedented, having already reached the 85th floor with ease. He decided to tease her, asking directly if she thought she could clear an entire floor of monsters with a single attack if she were in his position. She acknowledged the comparison to the legends of old, but reminded him she was in a class of her own. Still, she warned that at this depth, They needed to be extremely cautious. He asked what her backup plan was if he hadn't shown up. She admitted she would have been forced to hire his parents and several world-renowned adventurers as an escort. He grew irritated seeing the other teams already beginning their descent. Since their own teammate was still missing, he suggested they might as well start their advance without him. The woman admitted the situation was out of their hands, explaining that the missing member had taken a leave of absence, just as the director was about to request his help on a new project. Lars noted that this was the director's personal request, though the details were vague. Sylvia sighed, telling them it was pointless to worry and that they should go practice for the next ascent. Avia argued that a 3-person team was impossible. Lars, lying down in frustration, groaned that things were looking bad and asked if there were any other options. He suggested that since the guy hadn't contributed much during yesterday's descent anyway, they wouldn't be in any danger if they just stuck to the first floor. Avia hesitated, admitting she had serious doubts about the plan. Sylvia agreed, though she noted the situation wasn't entirely critical just yet. The boy admitted that while success was possible, it felt far too reckless. When he asked about his sudden appearance, the senpai explained he'd spotted them while visiting the academy on business. The man questioned if they were truly serious about this expedition. Lars admitted the plan was reckless, but urged his companion not to waste energy on unnecessary worry. Eager to join, the boy noted he was curious to see how far the team could push into the dungeon without a powerhouse like Soma-kun backing them up. He then asked if the academy had granted permission, declaring that he would take full responsibility and accompany the group himself. While the boy lamented their failure to find magic-granting treasures, the girl pointed out they'd found grimoires. He was simply one of those who refused to take the easy path to power. Unable to stand the mounting pressure, one of the members broke the silence, demanding to know what had happened to cause such a suffocating atmosphere. Agitated, the girl shouted for Director Soma. When he asked what the commotion was about, she delivered the grim news. Sylvia had vanished without a trace. He apologized, taking the blame for the mishap. But as they reached the 3rd floor, the girl cut him off, insisting they stay calm and focus on their next move. She commandingly ordered him to lead her to where Sylvia was last seen, but upon arriving, she was shocked to find they were on the 40th floor, doubting Sylvia could even be there. Another girl pointed out that their record was only the 30th floor. Going deeper was suicide. Avia added that with bosses every 10 floors, Sylvia stood no chance of surviving the 40th. Camila realized that only she, Sylvia, and the director had a real shot at success, noting that the massive power gap between them and the rest was becoming a liability. She warned that even if they broke through the resistance, the 40-floor doors were likely locked to prevent multiple entries, making a conventional rescue impossible. Declaring the debate over, the man ordered everyone to move out. When asked where, his casual mention of the 40th floor left the team paralyzed with fear. He politely asked her to lead the way, confident she knew the fastest route, while she admitted she was about to ask him the same, trusting him to handle the brothers. He suggested they take a shortcut and then glanced around to see who else was willing to step up. He personally requested that Anna and the others accompany him. They agreed it was a solid plan but questioned if their help was truly necessary. He admitted they might not be essential, but he felt safer with them by his side, a sentiment Ina quickly acknowledged. The boy requested that the instructor evacuate everyone else from the dungeon to prevent further casualties, and Camila agreed that a full retreat was the safest option. He agreed to the plan but couldn't help but comment on how surprising it was that they had to take such drastic measures so quickly. Privately, she wondered how the director could possibly detect someone as deep as the 41st floor, and if such a small team actually stood a chance of saving Sylvia. She suspected the 7 heavenly lines played a role, but feared a demon general might be lurking. If they faced the wrong opponent, things were about to get very interesting. He declared it was time to push those thoughts aside and begin strategizing their next move. She agonized over how things had gone so wrong, blaming her own obsession with magic for the disaster that struck on the 3rd floor. Admitting her failure, she realized she had relied too heavily on others and had vastly overestimated her own worth, feeling utterly useless. Her only dream was to be of use to her country and her family, pursuing magic simply to earn her place at the Royal Academy. Despite being surrounded by those far superior to her, she still hoped to pass, but her thoughts were cut short by a wave of terror as she clamped her hands over her mouth. The heavy thud of the monster's footsteps echoed right beside her. Squeezing her eyes shut, She desperately prayed the beast would just pass her by. Rapidly cycling through her intermediate skills, she confirmed the coast was clear and unleashed her extreme ESP. Suddenly, the beast lunged toward her location. She scrambled to her feet in a panic, fleeing while crying out that this wasn't supposed to happen. As the monster's claws closed in, she accepted the grim reality that her journey would end here in the cold embrace of death. Just as she whispered her final regrets, a sudden intervention came with a voice assuring her that today was not her day to die. Her savior had arrived, a man who delivered a crushing blow, cleaving the iron monster in two with a single strike. He bluntly admitted that he'd actually grown to like the academy, though it seemed their time there was drawing to a close. Lars sensed the root of the chaos, questioning if the entity before them was truly a fragment of an evil god's power. He wrestled with why no one had returned and what triggered this disaster, while she suggested the path back might have simply become too treacherous. Overcome with emotion, the girl tearfully apologized for the entire situation. A stranger pushed through the crowd, promising to handle the situation and urging everyone to remain calm and stay put. She reminded him that she'd warned them against entering the labyrinth, but her voice trailed off as she spotted a familiar face and screamed Soma's name. He demanded to know what happened to Helen, who stammered through her shock about the injured man, prompting him to tell her to snap out of it. A girl rushed in with devastating news. They had found Kurt Senpai, and his injuries were beyond repair. She relayed the Academy's official story, that Kurt had simply fallen, but he countered that it was impossible for a seasoned third year to make such a rookie mistake. She's convinced that someone with malicious intent orchestrated the incident, and he points out that Lars, a key suspect in Sylvia's disappearance, vanished at that exact moment. While he notes Lars is now a suspect in 2 different cases, she corrects him. These aren't random crimes, but links in a much larger chain of events. In Sylvia's case, Lars is the prime suspect for her teleportation, a conclusion he finds logical given the intel Helen provided. Curiously, only Sylvia noticed the trap while on guard, yet the device was designed to target and teleport only a single person to an unknown destination. To her, it's all too calculated to be a coincidence. There's no way such a sophisticated trap could evade a thorough investigation of the 3rd floor. Naturally, suspicion falls on her own party members. If the culprit was an insider, they could have easily manipulated her into walking right into the trap. However, one of her comrades was found with life-threatening injuries. While his facial wounds were caused by a monster, his arm was clearly broken by human hands. It looks less like he's hiding and more like he's desperately fleeing from something. The culprit seems obvious. Kurt likely uncovered Lars's scheme and confronted him. But it's baffling how someone as skilled as Kurt could lose that fight. She agrees, remembering that Kurt was the top student in middle school. How could a mere first year possibly overpower such a powerhouse? He speculates that Lars might have used a rare heirloom weapon from his aristocratic family, which would also explain how he bypassed the teleportation trap. If Lars really is the culprit, that secret weapon bridges the power gap and makes this whole scenario terrifyingly plausible. But what's the endgame? In Sylvia's case, it was a clear assassination attempt, yet it makes no sense to kill someone so far removed from the line of succession. Despite the lack of proof, she suspects a link to the heretics, a theory he finds sound, especially if their goal is to gather the fragments of the evil god. She reminds him that while kept under wraps, the heretics have become increasingly active lately, and he's already been caught in their crosshairs several times. They've reached the 91st floor, the domain of the floor boss, and they need to clear this labyrinth before time runs out. With the 90-floor boss slain, a massive hurdle in their quest for the evil god's fragments has finally been cleared. He pushes to map out the area for safety, fearing the fallout of another incident, but she warns they won't reach the bottom until tomorrow and urges them to hurry. As the skeleton vanishes into thin air, he's left wondering what this bizarre turn of events actually signifies. Realizing the skeleton was far weaker than the dragon, he counts himself lucky, though he admits he didn't actually defeat it, as it was already damaged before he arrived. Now, only one key remains. The girl lay in bed, consumed by bitterness over her failure to keep her composure. She berated herself for not reporting the trap the moment she sensed it. But then, a chilling realization hit her. That was no ordinary teleportation trap. This device was fundamentally different from any magical tool she owned, a fact Soma confirmed by noting he'd seen her use hers before. This left the other girl bewildered, demanding to know how Soma could have witnessed such a thing. He revealed they'd used a special item to bypass the 50th floor entirely. Though it was supposed to be a secret, the girl begrudgingly accepted his discretion, while her companion remained stunned that such a feat was even possible. He apologized for the oversight, noting that because they skipped ahead, the 40th-floor boss was still lurking. The girl waved off his apology, explaining that the trap likely used a specific activation formula, one that mimicked teleportation. He warned her that she was incredibly lucky to have survived the encounter. Had things gone slightly differently, both she and Helena might have ended up just like Kurt, or worse, dead. Resting in her room, the girl reflected on her own perceived helplessness until a sudden intuition drew her toward the door. There, tucked away in the shadows, she discovered a mysterious box. She scrutinized the object, noting it lacked the signature of a typical magical instrument. Confused, she wondered if this strange package was truly intended for her. Upon opening it, she found a letter inside, her heart racing as she dared to hope it was a message from Maria. She realized the weight of the choice being presented to her. Despite her mounting questions and the uncertainty of the situation, she felt she had no choice but to follow the summons. Mentally rehearsing her instructions, she knew she had to reach the labyrinth's 3rd floor and locate the trap. By utilizing mid-level stealth, she hoped to reach her destination without being intercepted. She discovered a brilliantly glowing orb and instinctively knew she had to enter. As soon as she reached out and touched it, the world around her dissolved into a nauseating high-speed blur. A stranger's sudden appearance startled her. The man greeted her as Sylvia, remarking on how long it had been since their last meeting, prompting her to desperately question if he was truly Kurt. She feared Kurt was on the brink of death, but he merely expressed his delight at seeing her again. He mocked her, claiming the obstacles he set were obvious, and that she was far too easy to deceive. He scoffed at his own disgusting tone of voice, wondering what his past self was thinking. When the girl pressed him to confirm his identity, he simply told her to look closer and decide for herself. The girl argued that the real Kurt was currently hospitalized, but he laughed off her confusion. He dropped a bombshell. The man in the hospital was an imposter. When she demanded to know the truth, he flashed a sinister smile. He explained that he'd simply found a body double of the same height and dressed him in his own clothes and ID. He mocked them for falling for such a pathetic ruse, calling them hopelessly naive. It had made his plan effortless, and he warned her not to ruin the show by worrying about trivial details. The horrifying reality finally set in, and she began screaming for Maria's whereabouts. Her heart stopped when she saw the girl lying motionless on the floor, and she shrieked her name in pure terror. He told her to stay calm, claiming he hadn't laid a finger on her. Instead, Maria had injured him, displaying the ruthless loyalty of a royal servant by attempting to bite off her own tongue to remain silent. He showed her his wounded hand as proof of Maria's resistance. When Maria tried to speak, he silenced her instantly, demanding the girl listen to his terms, forcing her to ask what he truly wanted from her. He claimed he didn't need anything substantial, simply asking her to spill her blood onto the black pearl resting upon the altar. Trembling, the girl stammered out a question, but he coldly dismissed her, warning that if she refused, death would claim them both. Paralyzed by fear, she eventually relented, approaching the dark sphere to let her blood fall upon it. As the world began to warp, the man broke into a manic grin, cackling that the seal had finally broken thanks to her royal essence. Confused, she asked about the seal, prompting him to mock her ignorance. Royal blood was the final key needed to unleash the fragment of the evil god trapped within. He roared with laughter, intoxicated by the overwhelming surge of dark energy, declaring that absolute power was finally within his grasp. He prepared to test his newfound strength, but the girl suddenly cut him off, her voice booming as she commanded him to halt. A voice rang out, expressing disappointment at his predictable nature, while the girl smugly noted that manipulating someone so transparent was child's play. Stunned, he demanded an explanation, only to be told that overconfidence is the ultimate downfall, a lesson that applies to everyone. The girl turned toward the newcomer, her eyes widening in shock. He double-checked if it was truly Soma before offering a casual greeting, noting how long it had been since their last encounter. Chuckling, he conceded that he'd been careless to reveal himself so soon, before glaring at the boys and demanding to know exactly what they'd uncovered. Soma revealed he'd pieced the mystery together the moment he saw the body, identifying Lars as the culprit while choosing to keep the secret from the rest of the team. He feigned hurt, chiding Kurt-senpai for his lack of appreciation, and questioning why he'd react so coldly after witnessing such a monstrous transformation. Kurt suspected the boy was masking his terror with jokes, but the boy simply asked if Kurt's goal was to seize this dark power, a fact the monster gleefully confirmed. Lars boasted about how he'd manipulated the hero into breaking the seal, but the boy's calm admission of prior knowledge left the monster bewildered. The girl stepped in, revealing she was the one who leaked the info since they shared the same goal, leaving the monster to wonder if the boy had orchestrated the seal's removal himself. She continued, clarifying that he had been a useful pawn in their scheme, before philosophizing that power is a fickle, double-edged sword. To properly harness or dispel this energy, it required a physical vessel. The monster laughed at being used so thoroughly, but warned them they'd made one fatal error. He shouted that they had severely underestimated the sheer magnitude of the evil god's malice as a suffocating, pitch-black miasma began to erupt from his body. The girl trembles in fear, asking if this is the power of a death god. The boy clarifies that it's merely a fragment. While its true potential remains dormant, even a sliver is enough to wreak havoc. One of the girls is furious at his carefree attitude, but he calmly dismisses her concerns, insisting there's no reason to panic over such a pathetic fraction of power. She scoffs that only he could be so arrogant, but the villain interrupts, warning them that they're gravely underestimating what he's capable of. Tired of the chatter, the boy decides to end this instantly, while the villain snarls that he'll make him regret his overconfidence. The battle erupts as the monster's tentacles ensnare the boy, but he's a blur of motion, methodically shredding through the limbs with his blade. Stunned, the monster screams that this is impossible. He wields the power of an evil god, yet he's the one being forced back. The boy mocks him, calling it a mere fragment and rebuking the monster for taking pride in power that isn't even his own. Closing his eyes, the boy offers a cold apology before declaring the monster's time is up. He swings his sword as the creature roars at him to stop looking down on him. Bitterness consumes the monster. Despite the massive power surge he received, he can't fathom why he's still failing so miserably. The boy acknowledges his thirst for strength but explains that his path was a lie. Borrowed power will never truly belong to him. He insults the monster's sloppy movements, telling him he could have been great with actual effort. As the beast screams in denial, the boy coldly announces that it's over. Pushed to the brink, the monster snaps, deciding that if the boy wants to play games, he'll show him exactly how deadly this game can get. He begins to warp, his tentacles swirling into a terrifying, localized black hole. The boy apologizes to the girl for his miscalculation, but she reassures him that no one could have foreseen things spiraling this out of control. When asked what went wrong, he explains that the enemy broke his power limiters right before death, turning the energy into something truly catastrophic. Frustrated, the young man regrets not finishing the job sooner, and while the girls agree it's a disaster, they know the situation was beyond prediction. If the phenomenon isn't halted, it will engulf the entire country within the hour, a realization that leaves the girls paralyzed with horror. Realizing he's out of options, the boy hardens his resolve as one of the girls calls out his name in a voice trembling with anxiety. He looks back, entrusting the future to them. He clarifies he isn't planning a suicide mission, but he needs to prepare them for the worst-case scenario. The time for action has arrived, and with the outcome uncertain, the girls mention Hildegard as they prepare for the final gambit. The girl refuses to explain the situation to his comrades, demanding he return and tell them everything himself, adding that she owes him one. He promises to give it his absolute all, while she calls out his name, her voice trembling with anxiety. Turning to Sylvia, she declares they must leave immediately before offering the boy a final farewell, which he warmly reciprocates. Now alone, the boy wonders how the future will unfold as he draws his blade and chants, "Sword of the mind, constant battle, blessing of the dragon god." The following day, the girl peers through the hole and notes a thick, terrifying aura of death that has persisted for hours. She realizes this is the overwhelming power of the evil god, one of the pillars who helped create the world, making such strength expected. While she acknowledges his divinity, she laments the lack of respite, refusing to offer any actual praise to such a dark entity. As the deathly aura thickens, she wonders what will become of the victims, while silently respecting how thoroughly this place was investigated. A voice from the hole reveals she was awakened for no reason, ruling out the evil god due to the massive time gap, which the girl sees as an ominous sign. Gripped by a sliver of hope, the girl asks the entity if her niece, Isun, is still among the living. When the group doubts her intel, she snaps back about the effort it took to find it, while the elf questions if the book truly concerns the forest god. She plays dumb about the contents, leaving the elf baffled since she was the one who handed him the book in the first place. She points out that only elves believe in the forest god. When the elf takes offense, she calmly states she's just delivering facts. She claims only two pillar gods exist, the evil god and the goddess, but the elf internally disagrees, determined to put the forest god back to sleep. She doubts the deity's status but points to the book, telling the indignant scoundrel that the method to seal the forest god is right there. The catch? He must sacrifice one of his own friends. As the elf stammers in protest, she coldly tells him he has no reason to hesitate. She mockingly calls it an elven specialty, reminding him that they used this exact ritual to seal the evil god a century ago, sending the elf into a blind rage. With an ironic smile, she claims the secret must have slipped out, meeting his stern demands for answers with a reminder that she has her own secrets. She offers a trade of information, catching him off guard by revealing she knows he is secretly harboring a witch. The elf reaches for his weapon, but she stops him, warning that killing her is useless since too many people already know his secret. The elf protested, arguing that releasing her wouldn't solve their problems, but she countered that she could spread misinformation to buy him some much-needed time. She then questioned if a sacrifice was truly necessary, suggesting he use a witch instead to kill two birds with one stone. The elf only grumbled irritably, telling her to shut up. She persisted, claiming he couldn't protect the witch forever and would eventually need a new hideout. To her, the choice was simple: sacrifice the entire race, or just one witch. Infuriated by her cold logic, the elf roared at her to keep her mouth shut. He pressed a spear to her throat, but she didn't flinch, stating that one meaningful death was better than 1,000 senseless ones. She left the weight of that choice entirely in his hands. Claiming she was only offering her personal opinion, she smiled and gently pushed his weapon aside, asking once more if he would finally let her leave. Without a word, the elf turned to walk away. When she asked if his silence meant consent, he simply replied that their business was concluded now that the goods were paid for. She acknowledged his words with a brief, "Fair enough," thanked him for his patronage, and the two went their separate ways. As she walked, she reflected on her recent failures. The demon lord's revival had been thwarted, the evil dragon was slain, and the mission to collect the fragments was a total disaster. It seemed the same person was interfering at every turn, and the girl was no longer amused. She could only hope that this time no one would be there to stand in her way. She wondered how much longer her current vessel would last, noting that they always traveled in threes. Soon, they would reunite, and she would have done everything in her power. Shortly after, the girl entered a quiet room and walked over to stare pensively out of the window. A voice called out to her, addressing her as Ina. Startled, she immediately turned around and claimed she wasn't doing anything suspicious. Closing her eyes, she admitted she was exhausted and needed a break. She told them not to worry, as she'd be taking a long, well-deserved vacation soon enough. One of the girls mentioned wishing she could treat people as effectively as Seema, while another noted that even the best healing can't fix total mental exhaustion. They praised his healing skills, noting how he saved Lars from the brink of death. They believed he could even cure a tired mind, before turning to ask Sheila about her vacation plans. Sheila revealed she was thinking of heading home, leading the others to ask if she meant the place where Doris was currently staying. She confirmed she was returning to the forest where she was raised. After everything that happened, she needed time to reflect and process the recent chaos in detail. Furthermore, she wanted to hone her swordsmanship. She was tired of being a bystander and wanted to ensure she'd never be stuck on the sidelines again. Sheila finally felt like she understood her path forward. Curious, she asked where the man was and what he was up to, and her friend briefly confirmed his whereabouts. The girl scolded him, snapping that he was always making them worry. Someone shouted for him to hurry up and get home, calling him a fool as he left. As the wanderer trekked across the open fields, something bizarre caught his eye. An anomaly he couldn't quite comprehend. Stunned, he He wondered to himself how someone, especially a child so young, could end up in a place like this. The wanderer carried the boy back and laid him gently on a bed. Upon waking, the boy realized he'd been rescued, though he felt completely drained of energy. He felt completely overexerted, but luckily his condition wasn't critical yet. A sudden knock at the door preceded a girl peeking in with an apology, her appearance instantly capturing the boy's attention. When he asked if she was his savior, she hesitated before admitting she'd found him in the field. He thanked her profusely, though she insisted it was no trouble. He apologized for his pathetic state and inability to move, but she assured him it was fine, asking if he was hurt since she hadn't found any visible wounds. Aside from some muscle aches, he felt okay, though he warned her his condition might worsen. He offered to leave if he was a burden, but she insisted he stay. She advised him to rest and talk tomorrow, but he insisted on at least introducing himself first, and she agreed. He introduced himself as Suma. She started to say Felicia Aria, but quickly corrected herself, asking to be called just Felicia before welcoming him. As she left him to rest, Suma couldn't help but stare at her striking features, her snow-white hair and piercing red eyes. A terrifying realization hit him. This girl was a witch, a being considered the enemy of the entire world. Witches were forbidden creatures, easily identified by those red eyes and white hair, and rumored to possess the power to plunge the world into chaos. Capturing her would bring him eternal glory, but sheltering her meant his family's execution at the hands of the Church of the Holy God. The Church of the Holy God was the world's dominant religion, with over 80% of the population following its decrees. Led by the saint, the fifth queen of the seventh heaven, the Church had officially branded all witches as the ultimate evil. Their crime? The use of cursed techniques, deadly, unique abilities with the potential to tear society apart. He noticed these curses shared a striking resemblance to magic. Having always been fascinated by the subject, he realized this was his chance to study them firsthand. Soma couldn't bring himself to brand all witches as enemies of humanity based on nothing but rumors, leaving him conflicted about his next move. The girl sighed, noting that while he looked like a child, he carried the sword of a witch hunter. Though she realized speculating was now pointless. Her heart raced under his intense gaze, wondering if he intended to kill her right then and there, but she decided to wait for the right moment to act. The next morning, Soma woke up and stretched, only to be interrupted by a knock from the girl, who greeted him warmly. Soma thanked her, noting his health had returned, though she humbly insisted she had done very little to actually save him. He reminded her that she'd provided him with food and shelter, but she countered by suggesting her kindness might have been for her own selfish gain. Placing a hand on her chest, she finally confessed to being a witch, prompting Soma to admit he no longer needed to hide his true intentions. He remarked that finding her was a stroke of luck, leading the girl to wonder if he had some sort of business with her kind. Soma explained his arrival was a total accident, while she revealed they were in the legendary Witch's Forest, a place he never believed truly existed. He finally understood why the forest was so well hidden, but the witch turned the tables, asking him to share his own knowledge of the world. Soma explained that the area existed within a spatial displacement, a theory she confirmed was the reason no outsider had ever set foot there before. After a moment of thought, he realized he must have accidentally torn a hole in space itself to stumble into her hidden domain. The witch expressed her deep regret, warning him that because the forest was so isolated, there might be no way for him to ever return home. Soma wasn't worried about being trapped. He was just thrilled to have finally met a witch, though she was confused as to why he'd seek her out. He dropped a bombshell, stating his goal was to master cursed techniques, a revelation that left the girl completely stunned. When she asked why he would want such a thing, his answer was simple. He wanted to master the art of magic. She clarified that cursed techniques were a far cry from true magic, and when he asked if she could help him bridge the gap, she gave a firm no. He argued that their similar natures could be the key to his success, but she warned that pursuing this power would make him an enemy of the world. Soma laughed off her warning as a joke, but she stood her ground, sternly asking if he truly understood the weight of being hunted by everyone. He declared that he'd never know until he tried, and seeing her reaction, he realized she actually could teach him, a fact she finally admitted. Inside the hut, the girl was busy stirring a bubbling cauldron. When the boy asked if the brew was finished, she curtly told him it wasn't time yet. As she continued to mix the concoction, she ordered him to sit down and stop hovering, threatening to kick him out if he didn't stop being so impatient. The boy apologized for his pushiness, but the girl's expression grew grave as she asked if he was truly prepared for the risks, warning him that the potion could be lethal. He reaffirmed his resolve, and with a heavy sigh, she announced the potion was finally ready, quickly dismissing his questions about her nervous whispering as mere imagination. Despite his lingering fears about the lethal warning, she handed him a bottle, casually mentioning she'd decided to use a different container for the final product. To finalize the brew, she pricked her finger and added a drop of blood, handing the jar to the nervous boy who hoped this was his key to magic, though she warned him not to expect a miracle. Stealing his nerves, he offered a quick bon appetit and took a deep swig from the jar. As she watched him intently, he reported feeling absolutely nothing, causing the girl to panic and scream that she must have missed a crucial step, despite her earlier warnings of low success. She admitted she had an instruction manual for the potion but hadn't consulted it. When the boy asked if she simply couldn't read the text, she sheepishly confirmed his suspicion. She explained that the book was written in a cryptic witch's tongue she never inherited the ability to read, prompting the boy to ask if he could take a look at the mysterious volume. She pulled the ancient book of witches from the shelf, and as he examined the arcane inscriptions, he confirmed that the entire text was written in that same undecipherable script. When he asked if she knew anything about the legendary holy heroes, she admitted they were nothing more than myths and stories she'd heard in passing. After scanning the first few pages, the boy realized the book was essentially a massive collection of complex alchemical recipes and elixirs. He noted that the handwriting shifted throughout the pages, suggesting the book was a generational heirloom passed down and updated by a long lineage of different witches. Stunned, the girl asked if he actually possessed the rare ability to decipher the text, and he gave her a confident nod. The next morning, the boy entered the room to find a transformed girl, who greeted him with a newfound, formal respect as Soma-sama. He realized her attitude changed once he translated the book for her, and after noticing her exhaustion, he told her to stop working and rest while he helped her gather supplies tomorrow. Relieved, she agreed to follow his advice, and he made sure she promised to actually take the day off and recover her strength. The following day, they headed into the woods to scavenge, though the boy was surprised by how sparse the rare ingredients seemed to be. She explained that while she only knew this specific path, the locals dubbed it the Witch's Forest, simply because she was the only one brave enough to live there. She admitted she didn't rule the entire forest, but few monsters there actually dared to challenge her. While foraging, she suddenly pointed out a rare blue flower, spotting it far faster than he had anticipated. He marveled at her keen witch instincts before they entered her home, exchanging a warm, "I'm back," and "welcome home." The girl found the exchange odd since they arrived together, but he argued that a home without a greeting is a lonely place. She confessed it was a habit she kept even when alone, but when he insisted on replying, she playfully called him annoying. She offered him a meal, but as he inspected the spread, he couldn't help but let out a skeptical grunt. Flustered, she asked if he was dissatisfied, prompting him to question why her table was completely devoid of meat and vegetables. She explained she only received supplies once a month, which usually resulted in a diet consisting strictly of fruit. Scratching his head, he realized she simply didn't know how to cook, which explained her fruit-heavy lifestyle. When he asked if she'd ever even tried frying food, her blank never left him deep in thought. Later, she suggested he forage alone tomorrow so she could catch up on sleep, but he insisted she needed the rest to stay sharp. She conceded he was right, but reminded him that her expertise was limited to ingredients she already recognized. Suddenly, the boy spotted a mandrake, but the girl warned him of the dire consequences of pulling one from the earth. She cautioned that their screams were fatal to anyone who heard them, making them impossible to harvest safely. Ignoring the warning, the boy grabbed a simple branch, leaving the girl completely baffled by his intentions. His first attempt sent the mandrake scurrying away, leaving her wondering how he'd managed to shift the earth with just a stick. He casually claimed it was a simple trick, but her furious reaction proved she found it anything but easy. He eventually succeeded in pulling one up, and while she was stunned, he was just disappointed he let 3 others escape. She remarked that he'd certainly shown off for his final day, surprising him with the news that he could finally leave the forest tomorrow. Later, the girl set out and met an elf, noting that he was just as punctual as always. The elf mentions he's on a tight schedule, explaining that any delay would be disastrous. He offers to wrap things up quickly and provides a full month's payment up front. Handing over a package, the girl expresses her sincere gratitude, but he dismisses it. He reminds her that thanks aren't necessary, This is simply the price he must pay. She insists on her gratitude, noting that she only survived this long because of his help. The elf stoically accepts her words before demanding she hand over the goods. After inspecting the pouch, the elf confirms that every necessary item is accounted for. The girl apologizes for the intrusion, but asks if she can clarify one thing. He tells her to speak her mind, but to keep it brief. Curiously, she asks what would happen to someone who accidentally stumbled into this place. Confused by the odd question, the elf asks for clarification, causing the girl to blush and claim she was just curious. The elf bluntly explains that they would hunt the intruder down and, depending on the situation, execute them. Horrified, the girl stammers, asking if such violence is truly necessary. He warns her that she doesn't grasp the gravity of the situation. If her existence here were discovered, it would be catastrophic. Absolutely no one can know her location. He adds that this secrecy is the burden the entire elven race must carry. Seeing her nod, he asks if her curiosity is satisfied before turning to make his exit. She bids him farewell until next month, and he gives a sharp, hissed confirmation. Suddenly, a mysterious voice behind her remarks on how interesting the elf is. Startled, the girl whirls around and asks Soma what he's doing there. He casually admits that his curiosity got the better of him, so he followed her. Fuming with rage, she demands to know why he'd take such a risk, asking what would happen if he were caught. He simply scoffs, fully confident in his stealth skills. Face-palming at his recklessness, she calls him an absolute idiot, but he insists the information he gained was worth the risk. Defeated, she admits she was far too naive. He explains that his real goal is to learn everything possible from the Book of Witches, which is why he refused to leave the forest. The girl can only let out a heavy sigh. He decides to stay for a short while longer, and since he's been so helpful, she realizes she has no reason to complain. They agree to continue their partnership. Reflecting on their encounter, the young man can't shake the feeling that something about that elf was incredibly suspicious. One girl acknowledges the weight of the situation, while another admits that seeing such progress makes her realize how much further she has to go. The blonde woman laments that words alone won't change their reality. She tells the others not to apologize, though she confesses she's a bit envious. One of the girls pipes up, asking if she can pose a personal question, and the blonde woman encourages her to go ahead. She asks a hypothetical. If she had to choose between the elves and Soma, who would she pick? The girl stares back, completely caught off guard by the question.